everybody.
Morning.
Woohoo! This is a fun weekend we're going to be having, huh? Yeah. I mean, I don't know how many of you had to come far, but I had to come a little ways, going on no sleep. Let's go, right? Anyway, I slept a little bit. Just so that I know, how many of you heard me speak maybe some other time at a different conference or somewhere? Okay, a few of you, yeah, maybe kind of. Okay, so some of you are like fresh meat. That's exciting. That's super exciting. So let me introduce myself just a little bit. In case you didn't read a bio, I don't even know if they published one. So my name's Nicolene Peck, and back in 1999, my family had a little change that happened in our home. And my husband, I had two young children, they were both just little babies at the time, and my husband decided that he needed to go back to school and he was going to make a career change. And at that point I went, okay, so that means no money, and what am I going to do with these little kids, and what do I do? And so I thought long and prayed hard and decided that the best thing that I could do for my family was still be there, and that I needed to find something that I could do to supplement the income. And we ended up doing foster care for troubled youth. And that seemed to be the best solution to our problem at the time. And I worked for a place called the Youth Village. The Youth Village was a troubled youth facility that was and you guys can have front row, just so you know, back up, okay. Anyway, the Youth Village was a troubled youth facility that mostly had youth ages 12 to 18, occasionally had a few youngers, and they were the most severe youth that the state had to offer. Many of them had been locked up multiple times, had multiple substance abuse problems, different things, and they were supposed to go to homes that were treatment facilities. So I started training to be a treatment parent so that I would do treatment in my home for some of the most troubled youth that the state had to offer. And the training was really intensive. They had certain things that we had to teach the kids. They had certain ways we had to correct the problems. It was more deliberate and planned out than any form of parenting that I'd ever been exposed to. But after just the first couple of nights of training with the Youth Village, I just had this huge apostrophe, and that's what I call epiphanies. And my apostrophe was, this is not hard. This is actually, it's structured, yes, really structured, but it's not hard, it's basic, it's simple. This isn't like brain surgery or something. And why don't people know this? Why don't they know how to just get a person to stop doing a bad thing and to actually have it stick? Or how to prepare a person so they won't develop a bad behavior problem? Why is this some mystery to parents, So people always say, and I've been known to say it myself, that parenting is the hardest thing that you'll ever do. It is true, but I think about hard, and I think hard means a lot of work, but it shouldn't necessarily mean pain. It shouldn't mean that it's a battle that you have to be in every single day. It doesn't mean that it should have to drain you emotionally every day, right? So when I think of parenting being the hardest thing that someone has to do, it could mean that, or it could just mean it's me deliberately focusing every day over and over again to get a certain goal, to get a certain kind of family. And I want to spend the next 3 hours with you in the quickest all-day seminar I've ever done, because usually I do them from like 9 to 5. So I'll just get in everything I can from 9 to noon, okay? And we'll try to make sure that we have plenty of times to answer any of your particular parenting questions or some of the troubles that you feel like might be inflicting your home or a friend's house or whatever you want to say, okay? Anyway, so we'll get to that. Just so you know, after we started doing foster care in our home for, I kid you not, maybe just a few months, 6 months maybe, people started coming to me and saying, what is going on at your house? Like, how do these kids change so fast? What are you doing? And that's what has started now 16 years of teaching for me. Is that people just said, will you come to our church and talk to us? Will you come to our school? Will you come to this conference? And just tell us what you're doing. And so that's when I started trying to help people, because I wanted them to have the same apostrophe that I did after a couple of nights of training with this troubled youth facility, and go, it doesn't have to be that painful. It doesn't have to be that way. As soon as we started learning some of the principles that we're going to talk about today in our home, my son, who at the time was 3 and a half and not potty trained and throwing metal Tonka trucks against the wall, all of a sudden stopped tantrums, potty trained. I didn't even have to fully potty train him. Our whole environment just felt safe. And he just transformed. And that's what I want to share with you, basically, how to do today, how to change that environment in your home. One of the things that I'm the very most known for is being on a program that the BBC produced called The World's Strictest Parents. This happened back in 2009. Do I look scary? I'm the world's strictest parent, apparently. And if you want to find that program, you can go to, ooh, that's a nice one. Okay. teachingselfgovernment.com. And you can click the video tab there and see that program. The BBC contacted me and they asked if they could bring us 2 troubled youth to live in our home, both of them age 17, and if they could film it. And we said, no way, is actually what we said, because we thought that wouldn't be very smart. I mean, we homeschool our family and everything, and they could make us look like freaks, is what we decided. And then in the end, we really thought about it, prayed about it, and felt like that this was something that maybe we were meant to do, so that we could maybe help other people, help families. And so we did. And this program, they brought us 2 unruly teens who were out of control for multiple days. For 2 days, they screamed and yelled and had tantrums as if they were 3-year-olds. And they ran away like 5 different times. One time they ran away from the director of the show, not from me, like they were the real deal. And then finally, after 2 days of running away, they just stopped and decided to be calm. In fact, one of my very favorite stories to tell is Hannah, the 17-year-old. She was a teen mom who had a party lifestyle, a lot of addictions. She really had some struggles, and she had a lot of tantrums and ran away a lot. And I said to her on day 3, I said, Hannah, for 2 days you have been angry and running away and stuff, and now all of a sudden you're just so calm. What has happened? And she said, well, at my house, if I yell, I get my way, or at least somebody yells back. But here, everybody was just so calm, it didn't work. So I just chose to be calm too. And that's basically how the story changed. On about day 2.5, everything changed and they were happy the rest of the time. By the end of the program, you see them crying because right before that cry, they didn't want to leave our home. Right before the crying, they actually were begging if they could stay. And they said, please, don't make us go. We feel so safe here. People will not understand back at home in England why we don't want to party anymore, why we don't want to, do these things that aren't good for us. They won't understand. Even our parents won't understand. And can't we just stay here? And we really wanted them to be able to, but obviously we couldn't. So anyway, that kind of transformation of heart, that change of heart, is what learning self-government is all about. Having a change of heart. And that's where we're going today with all of the classes that we're going to do, is talking about how to help our children have a change of heart. I want to start with a class that I call Cultural Parenting Revolution. The cultural parenting revolution of our day, or what we see happening culturally with parenting, is a little bit discouraging to me. And it's kind of sad because I think parents oftentimes feel like victims in their own homes to what is happening. And I want to talk about parenting and take a little bit of time with us to assess what's happening in our own homes, so that then we can move there and move on from there and figure out what we can do to make things a little bit different for us. So after I was on the BBC program, there was a man, Mark Wanstall, over in England. He's a lecturer for Leeds Metropolitan University. He wrote an article called "What Can We Learn from the World's Strictest Parents?" So of course I had to read that, because our episode became the most watched episode ever on the BBC, actually, because it was so calm, because there wasn't any conflict and the kids changed so dramatically. Anyway, so I thought, well, what did he learn from me? Certainly he's talking about me, since our episode was supposedly the most popular one, and I'm sure other people too. What he said was, the premise of the show was pretty simple. They take two naughty teenagers from one part of the world, from England, and they put them in another family in another part of the world who maybe have a little bit different culture or way that they live or something, and then supposedly they're supposed to experience some sort of change, or at least maybe see things just slightly differently. And he said some of the key things that he recognized. He studies family science, and so this is why he was writing this article. Some of the key things that he recognized were that all of these youth in England came from homes that he said had the emptying out of the adult identity, which means that the parents really didn't know how to be a parent, really didn't feel like they were good at parenting, and quite frankly, didn't really want to have to do it. And he said that this was a problem in our society today. The parents today have what's called the emptying out of the adult identity. And so, these children weren't given enough direction, was his consensus. He said that this was a fairly new cultural shift. He said that when he was a boy over in England, it was pretty much understood that an adult figure could correct any younger person around them, whether they were related to them or not. If you were in a town square and you were playing in a fountain and somebody came in with a tour group because they were touring that particular town square, and you were making noise or being a hooligan in any way, the person leading the tour group would say to their group, "Just a moment, I'll be right back." They would come over to you or to the child, and they would say, "This is inappropriate. You need to stop doing this. Go home." And then the kids would say, "Okay," and they would go home. They may not love going home, but they still would have done it. He says nowadays that is not the case. People do not see themselves as able to correct any other young person unless they are actually their parent. And even the parents aren't sure if they have the right to correct their own children. He said what parents have now is what he calls studied avoidance. Now maybe here in Omaha that seems strange to say. Maybe you guys are all still correcting your own children at least, and maybe other people's too, I don't know. But where I'm from, I see people watching little kids at the McDonald's playland beat on other kids and not say anything. I see parents be like, "That's not my child." and them not handling situations and not being adults. Why is that happens? Yeah?
Because when the kid's parent sees that, they will get on you for
They attack you.
Saying no to their children.
It's true. I've been attacked.
Like that by other parents before.
No, it's very true. I've been attacked at the McDonald's. When my oldest son was a little guy, this little girl kept laying him flat on the concrete, and he'd hit his head, and he'd cry, and she'd sit on him. And finally, one time, she didn't get off, and I had to pick her up, take her off. And about 10 minutes later, some mother came up to me and said, "You shook my child. I'm calling the police," and blah, 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 blah. And I thought, wow, we don't even support each other in our parent role. How could we possibly feel confident in what it is that we're supposed to be doing with our children? We're undermining ourselves with lawsuits and with lack of principle and understanding of what we're supposed to be doing as parents. And the reason why is basic. It's simple. It's the history of parenting. So if you study the history of parenting like I have, you recognize that there are 3 different philosophies for parenting. And the 3 different philosophies kind of go like back and forth and back and forth. There's especially 2 that are prevalent. The first one is the bully type. Well, let's not talk about that. Let's talk about the most modern one first. The most modern one is what Mark Wanstall calls the modern progressive parent. So the modern progressive parent is the one who is a descendant of the parenting ideals of Dr. Benjamin Spock. If you are familiar with his teachings at all. Many of you were probably raised with his teachings. You didn't know it, but you probably were if you haven't read his stuff. His books and things are actually still published to this day. I was teaching in China not long ago, and I'm walking down the street and I see his books for sale at a bookseller, and I thought, oh, this is so sad. I can't believe his stuff is still out there confusing parents and families, but it's like a bestseller. So anyway, his idea was that parents should be their children's friends. That this was the idea. Now, who doesn't want to have a great friend relationship with your children? I mean, that's a great thing to want to have, right? Especially when you're older. When you're like my age, and me and my mom, we want to be best friends with each other, right? Why wouldn't we? So that seems like a great thing to go toward, to be friends. The only problem is that Dr. Spock obviously didn't understand how friendship occurs in the parent-child relationship. So he basically instructed parents to treat their children as they would treat their friends, with the same kind of communication and respect that they would give their next door neighbor. So no boundaries, no correcting, no nothing. And that somehow that child would have increased love and respect and obedience for them. It failed. We ended up raising, the hippie generation was the first generation that got raised. And you see, it was a very rebellious generation, rebelling against all kinds of convention and familial structures that had been there for millennia of time. Anyway, so that was a big shift. Well, people nowadays are starting to see that probably there was a problem there, because their children are still not respecting them. In fact, it's getting worse. So now we have people who are promoting the type of parenting that Dr. Spock felt like he was combating, and that is the bully, fear-based method of parenting again. So there's all kinds of books and things out there about why you should spank your kids and all kinds of stuff like that. There's even a book out there by a woman named Wendy Chu. I don't know if you saw her book a few years back. It was called The Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mama, is what it was called. I'm not sure if she just wrote it for shock value to see what would happen or what. But anyway, in her book, she talks about how she can call her children garbage, how if she wants them to be proficient at violin or piano, she's going to make them sit there and practice it. They can't go to the bathroom, they can't eat food, they can't whatever, and she will make them sit there until it is done. And she talks about all the things that she would take away and the power struggles that she would get into with her children. And it's just like shocking is what it is. But parents were willing to do it because they were seeing that this be a friend to the children approach was not working. So it's kind of like on one end of the spectrum, there's this bully parent who instills fear into their children. And on the other side of the spectrum is the permissive parent who doesn't really want to be a parent but wants to be a friend and just be friendly. Usually in a household, there's one of each. That happens most of the time. I go to a lot of families and that's what I see. Like dad will be the bully and mom will be permissive and they both think each other's wrong. Okay? Or it could be the flip-flop, that mom's the bully and dad's the permissive. That happens more and more nowadays, actually. That mom's losing control and dad's the one going, just chill out, honey. Let's just watch a show and put everybody in front of the TV and keep it all calm, right? So that seems to be what happens. What most people seem to do is think that there is some middle ground in here where they have to be, in between the two. And so what they'll do is they'll be permissive and they'll be really friendly and never tell their child they've done anything wrong or anything like that. Don't correct them. And then when they see that there is a problem and the child is not listening to them and their frustration gets to a certain level, boom, they flip over to the other side. And then they have guilt, so then they go back to the other side after, and they feel like I just had to do that to stop that one thing, and that's what parents have to do sometimes. Have you ever seen people do that? Oh, good job on being honest. Okay. This is super, super common. The answer to the problem is not anywhere on this spectrum. The answer to the problem is on a completely different plane, and it's called traditional strict parenting. When they asked me to be on a show called The World's Strictest Parents, I was a little bit concerned that I would be labeled the strict parent, you know, like that. To me, the word strict meant ornery, and I didn't think I was ornery at all. In fact, I was very kind and very calm. They asked me, they said, would you consider yourself a strict parent? And I said, well, no, I don't yell at my children or anything like that. And they said, well, would you let them go hang out at the pub with their friends? And would you let them smoke and do drugs? I was like, no. And they said, well, then you're strict. So if you're like me, then you're strict. Like, you're already there, so let's figure out how to do it better, right? That's all it takes. It's a pretty low bar nowadays. You just have to keep your kids out of the pub. I'm just like, holy cow, that's it? Anyway, so that's all it took. So traditional strict parents are parents who follow principle. And we're going to talk now at length about all three of these different kinds of parenting and how they compare. It is my desire that as we go through making a little chart, and actually if you want a copy of the chart, if you don't want to have to write it all down, I'll send you one. If you just want to sign up on this, I'll just email it to you. Because I didn't know how many people would be here, and I don't have any copies. So any handouts that we need for this today, I'll just get to you if you're on there. And there's also like a little video that I'll send out to you too. So anyway, we're going to go through and make a chart, and we're going to talk about these three different types of parenting so that you can understand a little bit more about how they compare, and so you can see truly which one do you identify with and what has been happening in your home. So if you are going to draw it, it looks like this. It's a landscape page, but I will just send you this if you want. Okay? Okay, so the top, if you are writing, the top left-hand corner would say parenting forms. Then it would say modern progressive parenting, which is a very destructive form of parenting. Modern progressive parenting does not help a person have confidence. It does not solidify or unify family relationships. It is destructive. Next, the next row down, we will always talk about the bully fear-based parents. Bully fear-based, obviously destructive. They are in power struggles all the time. Super draining form of parenting. super draining, lots of emotion going on there. And then the final row will be the traditional strict parenting. That's the only constructive form of parenting because traditional strict parents are deliberate. They make a certain choice on purpose based on principle, and then they follow through. And so it's not something that they're just shooting from the hip in the moment. In order to teach a person self-government, so to be able to govern themselves, you have to be proactive, not just reactive. You can't do your parenting only when there's a problem. The parenting has to be happening all the way along. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, okay, but what about my 15-year-old then? Does that mean he's lost because we didn't do it all the way along? No. I did foster care for youth ages 12 to 18. And 17-year-olds showed up at my house on the BBC show. The worst 17-year-olds they could find in England showed up at my door, and in 2 days they were changed. So you can still change things at your own house. It might take you longer than 2 days, though, because they were a little shocked out of their culture. When it's in your own home, the kids tend to push a little bit more. Anyway, just so you know. All right, so the first column is the mode and movement of each of these parenting styles. So the mode and movement of the modern progressive parent is, just like the name suggests, to move on, to progress. So the whole idea is they think that they are improving on the past. The modern progressive parent feels like they are a part of some cultural parenting revolution. We are not going to instill fear in our children. We are now stepping past that. We're leaving that behind, and we're doing something way better. So their intentions are really good. In fact, I suggest to you that the majority of the people that fall into any of these categories, their intentions are good. Their processes, the way they process things varies, but their intentions are all usually good. That no one usually wants to destroy the lives of their own children. That's very rare that I see that. Oh, and there's a few, probably. Anyway, so they want to destroy the past and move on, but they do it by becoming passive. So the modern progressive parent is passive. They give up their parental power and their role. They abdicate that. They decide not to actually act in their capacity as a parent. The bully fear-based parent, their mode and movement is a move backward. It's kind of like a capturing, where they are so controlling, they are not going to let anybody in the family move past what they think needs to happen. So they're very closed, very holding everybody captive in the family, and they do it with emotion. It's emotional captivity. It's really an animalistic environment, survival of the fittest. You often see in homes where there is a bully, the children end up becoming what? Bullies. They do. It's a pretty good indication sometimes when you have a child that's a bully. Now, not always, because 3-year-olds have a tendency to experiment with bullying. Just, you know. Anyway, but also a modern progressive parent can produce a bully child as well, because if it's never checked, right? If that child experiments with being ornery or bullying and it's never checked. But bully people make bully children, and the bully children won't bully their parent necessarily, because they won't be brave enough to do that yet. But they're honing their skills, and they have to be ahead of somebody else. It's like the king of the mountain kind of a thing. They feel like they have to have a certain amount of power. It's very power-based, the whole system, and it's really aggressive. The mode and movement for the traditional strict parenting family is a move in. It's a move into the heart. The whole idea is that the person's heart is formed and changed. That is the purpose, that the person would desire to be good, not be manipulated to be good, as the bully fear-based family would do. It's a lot more organic. It's historical. There is morals backing this up. So there's moral order, and it's very principle-based. So the traditional strict parent has a lot of confidence in what they're doing because they know their skills are backed by their principles. They would never act or handle a parenting situation in anger or frustration. They don't need to because they have enough skills. And we're going to get to working on those skills today. The next column in the chart is the leadership structure. So the leadership structure for the modern progressive family is child-led. The child is the leader. Have you ever heard somebody say, well, our 3-year-old runs our house, you know? We hear things like that sometimes. That's like not a good sign, you know, if the 3-year-old is running the house. Strong-willed people are great, but we need to make sure that they don't get in the position of leadership and tyranny, really, over everybody else in the house and manipulating everybody. The parent's role in the modern progressive family is a manager. They're a facilitator. They offer experiences and money and stuff like that. And they give opportunities. So definitely the child says, I want, and the parent says, I'll take care of that for you. That's how it happens in the modern progressive family. And I'm guessing the majority of you probably aren't fully one way or another. You're probably kind of a mix, because that happens a lot. In certain circumstances, you do one, and in certain circumstances, you do another. A lot of people get into the trap of turning their child into the leader of their home because of social conformity. Just because in society it's really popular now to talk about, well, what does the child want? Well, the child led this, even here at a homeschool conference, this might turn some of you off, but I'm just gonna say it. I've homeschooled my children all the way, right? So from the very beginning and up through, they start college about age 16 and get going. Child-led education. Have you heard this term before? Yeah, child-led education is very misunderstood. Education should always be parent-led, actually. And the children have to learn how to lead themselves. They do not have their brain, the front part of their brain, the logical part of their brain, is not fully developed until between the ages of 18 and 24. So can they fully, put all the pieces together and lead themselves fully? They can't. If you put that on a child, that means frustration and anxiety. Now, there are some who will lead out more than others. Some parents feel like they're failing if they've got a child who doesn't want to lead their own education. Well, that's probably because they're the type of person that needs the parent to be more of a leader, is what it is. Parent-led education means the child can have lots of input and there can be lots of discussion, but this is an ADD moment, by the way. It's not my presentation. But anyway, but you want to be so careful that you don't. They need to have ownership of an education. Like each person needs ownership of their own education. That's a principle. But turning it over to them might be abandoning them when they need to have someone there to continually inspire them and give them ideas and point them in the right direction, and sometimes give them no answers, right? They actually need that, and they thrive in that structure. And that's what I've seen. People always ask me, well, Nicolene, how do you do that with your kids? How do your kids read all those great classics and do all that stuff? And that's how I do it. I help give them ownership. They plan a lot of things in their day and stuff like that. But they plan a day and they sit down with me and do it. I lead them through the process. Does that make sense? So, okay, anyway, ADD. Boop. Okay, we're back. So, hopefully that helps someone. I just felt like I should say that. So, hopefully it does. Okay, leadership structure for the bully fear-based family. You could say there's a leader. He's more like a tyrant, really. I would say that's not a leader, because if you understand what a leader's purpose is to lead or is to guide another person toward leadership. In this particular model of parenting, the tyrant does not care about if the other person is going to turn out to be a leader or not. They just want things done their way right now. That's it. It's all about their way. So I say no leader. The parent is definitely enforcer. It's all about compulsion. There's definitely this war feeling, us against them, okay? So if you feel like every day is a battle, you might be falling into this category regularly. The traditional strict leadership structure is parent-led and modeled, which means that you are using the same principles that you are teaching the children. There's no hypocrisy. Everything is based upon a truth. It's very cultural. It's unified. And it's done in a certain atmosphere. A parent who is a leader type parent knows their atmosphere must back them up. If you want to raise a leader and you want to be a leader, you cannot spend the majority of your day with people who believe in anarchy, which are a whole bunch of the peers that your children might have. If they are with peers all the day who are fighting for anarchy, then they're going to have a hard time understanding. So you have to create an environment that supports that leadership. We're going to talk about more how to do that. The third column is teaching. So the teaching for the modern progressive family, there is no right or wrong. Everything is subjective. And maybe you've seen this in society. I know I have. The modern progressive parent thinks that society is the authority figure. Well, whatever society does, then that must be the right thing. If society thinks it's bad, that might be the wrong thing. They have a tendency to believe in legalism. So legalism means if it's legal, it's right. And if it's not legal, it's wrong. And that's your basic code. Otherwise, there really isn't a right and a wrong. How often do laws change? Like all the time, right? Every year, at least once a year, the laws change. So I don't even know if we could say that all laws are even right anymore. Do you follow the law like I do? I go to the UN and I see some of the stuff they do, and I go to my state legislature and try to fight to protect the family in laws that they're making. And the things that they decide are sometimes so ridiculous. They have nothing to do with what is right and wrong. I don't know if you've worked in an office where all of a sudden they have all these little OSHA codes or different things, and it's like it's wrong if you don't wash it this way, you know, and all this kind of, is it really wrong? Like, do you see what I mean? Do you see how that could be so confusing, so subjective? Our society is suffering from lack of clarity of what is right and what is wrong. We did not used to have this problem back when our country was formed. People knew what was right and what was wrong. Now we have what's called relativism, which has really hit the kind of mainstream. Well, if it's good for you, then it's good for you. And if it's so we're just like throwing right and wrong out the window. It's actually okay to believe in right and wrong, just so you know. The goal for this subjective teaching for the modern progressive parent is independence, which doesn't sound so bad, right? Like, you want a person to be independent. The problem is it actually fails. So to make the person independent, the modern progressive parent does nothing. Yes. So that means that the child's left to figure out everything all on their own. How independent is a person like that? No way, they're in bondage. Like, they've got to start to square one. I have this great friend. He comes to a discussion group at our house, and he used to be an atheist fellow and had doctorate in philosophy and physics, really smart guy. And he said, you know, no one in the philosophy department would discuss wisdom with me. And the reason why they won't discuss wisdom is because you can't be wise. They said that's not worth discussing. And he said, because they said you can't discuss wisdom unless you are willing to determine a right and a wrong. And you can't determine a right and a wrong without acknowledging theology. And they won't do it. He said, so I took a total break. I was almost done with my doctorate, and I decided I was going to research wisdom. So we did like a C.S. Lewis, right? It was decided that he would try to figure this out. And he ended up finding God, bless his heart, and ended up deciding he wasn't going to finish his degree. But isn't that interesting? And this comes from the universities, that we need to prepare our children for, we need to insulate them. Because these ideas are everywhere. They're all out there, especially in academia. We're wanting to make some of the smartest kids out there. We got to be so careful we don't turn them over to the wolves, right? As soon as we gave them all these brains, you got to give them core. Core is so important. So, bully fear-based, the teaching. There is a definite right and there is a definite wrong, and it's determined by the parent. It's called positive legalism. That means, is it legal according to this ruler? That's what it means. So if it bugs me, it's wrong. If I like it, it's right. Right? So, you like that one? Okay. It's called positive legalism. We all hate the bosses like that at work. We hate that. Because they're the ones who are like, you know, like they make everything a federal case, right? Like you left a few water drops on the counter, that is wrong, right? Like is that wrong? Could we actually put a moral on that? No, like I mean they just go a little crazy. Anyway, the goal is codependence for that teaching style. So the person who is raised in that home will always need somebody to tell them what really is right and wrong. They'll need to have those pet peeves or whatever for them to determine. The teaching for the traditional strict. There is right and there is wrong, and it's determined by principle and by their core book. So their Bible, their scriptures, their things that they find that are true. That is where the traditional strict parent finds their principle. What I have noticed is that I meet a ton of principled parents. Most parents won't come sit for a day or a weekend. We do these couples retreats. We're doing one actually in October if you want to come to Cancun for 5 days with us. Sounds fun, huh? Anyway, we would love to have you. So Cancun will be the end of October, the 15th to the 20th. 2.5 days are training, and the other 2.5 days are play. Anyway, so what parents, I notice that these parents that will come sit with me and talk about this stuff, they're very principled people. Otherwise they wouldn't spend the time to sit here, right, and listen to this. The problem is they don't have the skills that back up their principles. That's a skill. How can you do the teaching without the skill to teach it? So you have the principle, you constantly would then be trying to figure out, how do I teach them that principle? How do I teach them humility? How do I teach them respect? Do you know what I mean? And so it's frustrating for the principled parent, because they know there's a principle, but they don't necessarily know how to put that into action with the child when it's really needed. And that's the one thing I'm really good at. So we're going to talk about that. Anyway, so it is moralism, if you want an ism for this teaching style. Moralism, and there is a duty, to a higher authority. There's God. There's something higher, something bigger than themselves. The goal for this teaching style for the traditional strict family is interdependence. themselves, and that they have interdependence with God, right? Because it's moralism, they know they can't do whatever it is without that higher authority helping them out. Okay, the next column is the foundational principle and effect. As you might have already guessed, the foundational principle for the modern progressive family is entitlement. They don't even know they're teaching it. Many of them know that's a problem in our society. Yet they promote it day after day by being a facilitator and a manager for their children and just offering experiences and driving them everywhere. If you are in your car way more than you like to be in your car, I mean, assess whether it's a good amount or not. But if you're in your car every day, all the time, it is very likely that you are promoting entitlement, actually, with your children. If your children always have little square things that they look at, it is very likely that you're promoting entitlement with your children. You have to look at these things very deliberately. That's what a traditional strict parent does. They don't ever just turn their kids over to whatever happens. That's what the modern progressive parent does. And they consider social acceptance and all that kind of stuff before they make a decision. They read certain books because of social acceptance. They watch certain movies because of social acceptance. They dress a certain way because of social acceptance. All of those kinds of things. And it could be for the good or for the bad. Either way, they end up promoting entitlement. And one of the key reasons that the modern progressive family promotes entitlement is because the children are pretty much free from correction. So they're not corrected for the majority of the things that go wrong. The parents just go, well, that's maybe a phase. Hopefully they'll figure it out. Maybe tomorrow they'll be over it. I'll give them a couple days to chill out, and then we'll just move on, right? The result for the child is confusion, loneliness. They feel burdened. Lots of depression results in kids who are just turned out and who are not corrected quickly. If you let your children stew over something and not be calm for a couple of days, and you don't help them to try to free them from that, then it leads to darker thoughts. They think bad about you, they think bad about themselves.
Can I ask a question at this point?
Yeah.
So, at what point do you let them think things through, and at what point do you stop that then? Like
Think things through.
like a coach says something, it's disturbing to my child. Is the coach really wrong at what they said, but the child is going into
I would
that
help them
place?
process it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely talk to them about it and help them process it. I think they have to learn how to accept criticism. That's a really important skill, because otherwise it could destroy them, right? So that's, you're gonna wanna give them some skills so that they can handle it. We're gonna get more to that. If I take that right now, it'll throw us too far off course. Is that
That's fine.
okay?
Yep.
But write it down to make sure I get to it, okay? For sure we will get to that. All right. There's too many choices for the modern progressive child. They don't know what's right or wrong, so they could choose anything. The whole structure is identity-based, but they have no identity. Because parents form an identity, they help structure an identity. They're left to determine their identity all on their own, which is a super overwhelming process, especially when you're not told what's right or wrong. How could a person possibly come up with that? That's a lot to problem solve when the front of your brain that does your problem solving isn't. It's like, anyway, it is more dangerous to be a modern progressive parent than to be a bully, actually. The foundational principle, oh, by the way, quick story on the modern progressive. There was a woman one time when I was giving this class, and she raised her hand and just in tears, she said, I was raised by that modern progressive parent. And you are right. It is lonely. You feel abandoned. She said, I started making every bad choice I could make just to see if I could get my parents' attention. Because they were never there. And when they were there, they were watching some TV show or computer game or whatever it was, and they didn't even pay attention to me. And even when I made the worst mistakes, they still never paid attention and didn't seem like they cared if my life ended or didn't. That was an extreme case, but you see how their behaviors will start to, even they don't want it, even though it seems like you're giving them what they could want. The foundational principle and effect for the bully fear-based family, the foundational principle is punishment. I don't like the term punishment. I know that, it can be used in a good way. The term can be used in a good way, but usually when I think of punishment, I think of, I got hurt or something made my life inconvenient, so now I'm gonna make your life inconvenient. So now it's gonna hurt for you. And these parents are the ones that always say to me, well, what if they like extra chores? And I say, that's okay. It's okay if they can be okay and say okay to a negative consequence. They don't have to be sullen the whole time. You don't have to get an emotional reward because you taught somebody cause and effect. But these parents are the kind that feel like they're the kind that will lecture their child into the night, like for hours, until they feel like they've broken the child significantly enough down to where they got something back from the child. They felt the child broken or remorseful or whatever it was. It's just not necessary. We'll talk about what you can do instead, okay, of those things. Bully fear-based, the punishment principle really does come from a place of anger, a place of selfishness for the parent. The parents put out that they have to be doing this parenting, and they want to show that they're put out to the child. The result for the child is fear, obviously, dishonesty, and distrust. Of course, you're not going to trust your parent when they could blow up at you at any moment. But the dishonesty is one people don't often realize. And I've seen it multiple times. There was one time there was a little boy playing over at our house. This was years ago, and his mom came to pick him up. And I'll never forget, I invite her in, I go to get her son, and he comes, out to see his mom, and all of a sudden she just lays into him. And she's like, shorts? Why are you wearing shorts? It is March. I told you you couldn't wear shorts, blah, blah, blah. And she just starts yelling at him. And I'm standing there thinking, don't you know I'm the world's strictest parent? Like, I could help you with this. Anyway, and all of a sudden I see this boy just like retreat, right? He glazes over, he retreats, and he's like, well, Dad told me I could. She's like, no, he didn't. He wasn't even home, blah, 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 was it? I called him. I did. I called him and asked him. She's like, you did not, blah, blah. Anyway, lie after lie after lie. He was trying anything he could think of to get out of that confrontation in that moment. And I see this kind of thing all the time. Kids lying to their parents because the parents all of a sudden start power struggling with them, and the kids are freaked out and don't know how to preserve themselves because it's self-preservation in the bully fear-based family. The foundational principle and effect for the traditional strict family is, foundational principle is consequence, or it's a consequent system, which means that everything is based on cause and effect and truth. The result for the child is freedom, safety. Just like the BBC children said, we feel so safe here. They didn't even want to leave, and it was more structure than they'd ever seen in their whole lives. And they loved it. They couldn't wait. They felt loved. They felt connection. There was unity because there was order. And it wasn't the kind of order that was oppressive. It was a kind of order that was liberating for them. They felt free. The next column is the focus. So the focus for the modern progressive family is self-discovery. The whole idea is you get to find out who you are and what you're doing with your life and everything else, and you get to go figure that out, which is a little overwhelming. To some degree, we all have to discover a few things. There's like a shred of truth in there. journey is about self-discovery. It's awful frustrating if you don't give anybody anything else beyond that. The focus for the bully fear-based family is self-preservation. That's what the children are trying to do, is just preserve themselves. The focus for the traditional strict family is family unity. So you notice the difference. The other two forms, modern progressive is self-discovery. The next one is self-preservation. But traditional strict is family unity. It's not about the self. There is nothing more liberating to a person than realizing that their life is not about them. As long as we think our life is just about us and the way that we feel and what we like and what we don't like, we will never feel fulfilled. We'll never accomplish whatever mission it is or purpose it is that God put us here for, because we will only be looking out for how we feel all the time. A person who is raised in a traditional strict family is a person who makes an impact. They are the kind of people who know that it's about this bigger group, this family. There's a larger purpose to this than just themselves. And because they get that training in the home, then when they are out in the world, they also see, well, how can I benefit the people? How can I raise the bar for people or free other people? What can I do? They think differently because they've been doing it in the family all along through their growing up years. Agency is the next column. The agency for the modern progressive family, it seems like there's agency. What they really have is complete license to do whatever they want, but that's false agency, because they are choosing without any consequences or understanding of what's right and wrong. So there's a complete disconnect to consequences. They think they don't apply. And that's why they become entitled, by the way. Children who cannot accept when you give them a consequence or a no answer are entitled children. They are not acknowledging that there are causes and effects. They haven't learned it. Every youth that came to our home was entitled. They all had the same thing. They didn't think they should have to be corrected for their problems. So, were you going to say something?
You said every child that does not accept a consequence or
Accept a no answer.
a no answer.
Yeah, from their parents. Like if you say no, you can't do that. If they have a problem with that, they have entitlement. So entitlement's bigger than just stuff. It affects our relationships. And it's something as a society we have kind of groomed ourselves to accept and tolerate. Oh, by the way, I just say it like it is. Have you noticed that? Okay. All right, so the agency for the modern progressive family is, it's really unpredictable. It's trial and error. Everything they have to try and figure out on their own. For the bully fear-based family, there really is no agency because you just have to choose what the dictator is not going to get mad about. It's conformity. There really isn't full choice there because there's oppression. And it's usually emotional manipulation, whether the oppressor cries and makes a big pity story, or whether the aggressor gets angry and physical, still the person feels like they don't want to create that, so, and that's not the right kind of cause and effect to teach. It shouldn't be fear of people and their reactions. It should be go back to what is the right way to handle something, what leads you to freedom, what leads you to bondage. Another person's bondage like that, and them choosing bondage, shouldn't be a reason for a child to make a choice. It's super unpredictable, and kids learn to work the system. The agency for the traditional strict family is true agency, as you might suspect. There's actual liberty there. So for a person to have liberty, they have to have fluency. That is the base of the word liberty. Liberty comes from the word liber. Liber means tree bark. People back in the old days, long time ago, millennia ago, They were called livers if they could read what was written on the tree bark and if they could write what was written on the tree bark, and then they would go and speak from town to town what was written on the tree bark. These were the most free people in the community. That is why we have books like, or that's why books are called liberal, and we have library and liberty. It all comes with this idea of fluency, that the people fully understand what makes them free, that they know stuff, that they can problem solve stuff, that they make choices for themselves. So if your child does not know exactly how you would handle it if they come home an hour late for curfew, they are not free. They need to know. If they don't know exactly how you will handle it when they punch their brother in the face, then they are not free. Your family should know all of that ahead of time for them to be fully free and encourage them to make the right choices. Because the traditional strict family makes choices with a knowledge of the consequences, it is a completely predictable environment. Our last column is the parenting action. The parenting action for the modern progressive family is ignoring. It's very wild. I don't know how many of you, of course, this part of the country might be different. I live in the West, so this part of the country might be different, but at my house, if I want a garden, I don't go out and just like put a little fence around the area and go, grow, I want corn. It doesn't work in my neck of the woods. I don't know about out here. I know some people out here don't even have to water or something, but I do. Anyway, you have to actually cultivate the land where I live, otherwise you get weeds and stickers and stuff like that. So I have an image in my mind, this modern progressive family. I feel like it's like water, always going to the lowest possible place, the path of least resistance, whatever's going to be easiest for everybody, and usually leads to a lot of disconnection in the relationships. In our family, we call that the PLR, and everyone has a tendency to want to do it because our brains try to be as efficient as possible. So sometimes kids will PLR on their chores and stuff like that, and we have to talk about it. Anyway, the parenting action for the bully fear-based family is requiring. That's the action. It's like the hunter-gatherer mentality. Listen, I want that, so I'm just going to take it. No cultivating involved. I want that deer, I'll take it. I have nothing against hunting, just so you know. I'm actually pro-hunting, but it's the principle. Parenting action for the bully fear-based family, requiring an image in my mind is like a rock, really unyielding. You can't change it. You can't move it. It's just, you're just stuck there. The parenting action for the traditional strict family is training and inspiring. So to inspire, you have to teach all of those principles, and to train, you have to have certain skills to have that predictable environment. There's a lot of planning. It's like planting and cultivating and nourishing the soil and watering and all of those kinds of things. And that's the image in my mind is soil when I think of the traditional strict parenting family. So, I hope you've had an opportunity to think of yourself and what it is that you do. I hope you haven't beaten yourself up too much, because we're going to go from here to a really good place. But all good change starts with a little bit of pain. So I wanted to offer that for you today, just a touch, so that you could see where you were at. We are going to, you can stretch for like 2 seconds. And I'm going to switch papers, and then we'll get going on the rest of stuff today, okay? Years ago, a friend of mine just said, Nicolene, I think this life really is just like a battle with ourselves. Well, by the way, this class is called Training the Heart. And I think I'm probably going to end up doing a little bit of an abbreviated version of the class. So if you want the full version, you'll have to get it online. And there are all kinds of things on teachingselfgovernment.com. And I have tons of stuff at my little booth that's out right in between those 2 doors. So if at any time you want to take anything home with you or for a friend, I would sure love not to take him back on the plane. That's my shameless plug. Okay. Anyway, this friend of mine said, this life is a battle with ourselves. I was like, you're so right. That battle is, will we self-govern? Will we govern ourselves, or will we turn over our lives to circumstance? That's the battle. Do we allow ourselves to be the victims of circumstance and have every excuse in the world, or do we decide to take charge? So that take charge is called self-government. And maybe some of you have heard me share this before, but I want to share with you my definition of self-government. So self-government is being able to determine the cause and effect of any given situation and possessing a knowledge of your own behaviors so that you can control them. So there's two parts to what self-government is. Number one is being able to determine the cause and effect of any given situation. You got to know that. Like I said, every foster child that came to my home did not know cause and effect. Number two is possessing a knowledge of your own behaviors so that you can control them. So you have to know yourself and how you choose things. You have to determine, okay, well, what are some of the problems that I have? What are my behaviors that get me in trouble? What are some of the troubles I face? What effect would I like to see happen? What kind of a change could I make in myself then? What sort of a pattern do I need to alter? Or what habit do I need to get rid of? And what new habit do I need to learn? What skill am I missing? This is the state of self-government, when you are in this state. It's taught. This is not something that most people just get. There are a few, and maybe even you're one of them. I actually feel like I'm kind of one of the luckier ones. I didn't fully learn it on my own, but close. When I was, I think 14, I might have been 13. I change every time I say it because I can't remember if I was 13 or 14. But anyway, we'll call me 14 today. When I was 14 years old, I did not get along with my parents at all. We fought and fought and fought. And it was so bad that I was just defiant just because I had a habit of being defiant. And they never let me do anything because they didn't know if they could even trust me, because when somebody's defiant, how do you really know if you can trust that person? So I was pretty much on lockdown, could hardly ever do anything with friends and that kind of thing. And really, truly, it was probably for my good because I was in a state of defiance. Although I think in comparison, I still was a pretty good kid compared to most of the kids around me. And so they probably would say, oh, she's really spiritual and she's really, but boy, is she strong-willed. That's probably how they would have described me, right? Me and my dad especially would knock heads. He was the kind of dad where he would say, no, you can't do that. And I would say, why? And he would say, because I'm the boss. And I would be like, that's so weak. Like, what kind of a reason is that? You know, that means nothing. So like the honor thy father and mother thing, from the Bible, like, no, I wasn't doing that. Anyway, so anyway, what happened was this happened to me because of one statement that a person made. So I happened to be at a neighbor's house. We were planning a party for a group of youth in our area. And then I said, well, I'm not going to be able to go to this party because my parents never let me go to anything. And this woman, who was the mother of my friend, she's like, what do you mean you're not going to go? We just spent all this time planning this. Of course you have to go. And I said, no, we only fight at our house. My parents never let me do anything. And she asked me a question that changed my whole trajectory of my life. She said, Nicolene, have you ever thought of just saying okay? I was like, what? That would never work. That's what they want me to say, right? You don't ever say bet you that if you went home for 2 weeks and you said, okay, you decided to say okay and be okay every single time that your parents told you to do something or to not do something, I bet you in 2 weeks you could come to the party. I didn't believe her, but she challenged me, so I was like, okay, you can't talk to my parents, don't tell them. Because I wanted to see if it was an authentic, study. And so she was like, no way, I'm not talking to your parents about their parenting. I'm like, okay. And I said, okay. So I went home and it was my dish night. And I remember my mom in her kind of like ready for confrontation voice saying, Nicolene, it's your dish night. And I said, okay. And I stood up, I started doing the dishes. And there was shock, like shock on my parents' faces. And I remember this like vacuum noise, like really truly took them right off guard. And I thought that was cool, but didn't really feel like it would make such a big difference. So then the next day, my mom dropped like the whammy on me. She said, you really should clean your room. And my room was like clothes everywhere and like a little path, And I said, okay. And I just started cleaning. I remember my mom leaning in the doorway to my room for, I kid you not, like 20 minutes, just watching in disbelief. And I was, of course, still sort of defiant and proud, so I tried to pretend I didn't see her, as I was cleaning. And then this thought popped into my head. And this thought meant a lot to me at the time. It may seem ridiculous, but the thought that came into my mind was, I am so powerful. That was the thought that I had. And it occurred to me I had chosen happiness. That never again would I have to choose to not be happy. That somehow I could just pick it. And this was incredibly powerful for me. I was like, oh my goodness. In the past, I used to pick the wrong effect. But now, I see I can do something different. And I will now say okay, and be okay, and get what I want. So I was selfish, but it worked for me, and I did get what I want. So within days, I said, can I have friends over for this? Oh yeah, sure. Can I go to the mall with so-and-so? Yeah, sure. Can I go to the party? Of course. Of course. Our relationship was repaired. I will never forget my father standing in front of the congregation at our church saying that he wanted to thank his daughter for teaching him how to be a good parent. My parents changed too. They saw me have a change of heart for selfish reasons, mark you, for selfish reasons, but, sorry, I like Shakespeare, but they saw my heart change for the good. When I saw that it worked, then I had a full change of heart. So I want to talk to you today about that change of heart. That change of heart that is called self-government. And if I could draw one more picture for you, some of you might have seen this when I was here, I don't know. I should take up residency in Omaha, because in the last year I've been here 3 times. I'm like, wow, I'm making some really good friends. Anyway, okay, so when I was here just a short time ago, I shared a diagram, and the diagram looked like this. And this is the picture of self-government. This is the picture that the Anglo-Saxons, who are credited a lot with the self-government model, came up with. So the Anglo-Saxons, they founded England, which used to be called Anglo-land. They divided their community into groups. So you see the same thing happen in the Old Testament of the Bible. You see the Israelites, they divided into like groups of 10s, groups of 50s, groups of 100s, that part of the Bible. Anyway, and so the Anglo-Saxons made their form of government based off of the Israelite form of government, and then the United States founders, when they were studying government, made their government based upon the Anglo-Saxon form of government, which was totally natural for them because their form, the Anglo-Saxon form of government was a form of government the founders would have learned from a very young age. That was the foundation of England and their government. But then when the government started to go south and they kept eroding more and more of that Anglo-Saxon way, that's when the colonists here were getting more and more mad. Okay, that's why we fought back. So this is the model. If I have a problem, the first person I go to is myself. So when I was 14 years old, I went to myself for my problem with my parents, and I didn't come up with much. If I couldn't find a problem, a solution to my problem, if I didn't have enough skills myself, then the next person I should have gone to but did not, because of social structure, is family. The family is the next line of defense. Now you can think of this in terms of getting a job, and it's really easy to see. Let's say I lose a job, okay, and I need to find employment for my family. So I'm going to think, what can I do? What trade do I have? What talents do I have? What things can I sell or liquidate? How can I find money that I need? I go to myself first. This is what people are supposed to do, okay? Then after that, I would go to my family, and I would say, okay, you know what? I've tried everything I can think of. Do you have any people that you can network me with? Do you see any problems that I have that I can correct? Can you give me any skills that I haven't learned yet? That kind of a thing. So the family is the next line. Then after the family comes friends, or like the civil society or community. So I found an answer to my problem with my parents here, because this band was totally fractured. I had ruined it. And I felt like that was totally socially acceptable at the time. I don't know if you were raised like me, but a lot of people didn't go to their parents, which is kind of sad. So then we go to friends and we ask the same questions. What skills do I need? What people do you know? How can you help me? What am I missing? If nobody in that line of defense can help us, then we go to our church and we ask our pastor, hey, do you know anybody that I could work for like this? Can I help out the church in any way? Can you give me any counsel? What can you do to help me to fix my situation? Because I've tried all these other lines of defense and they didn't help. If the church cannot help, then we go to government. Now, in our society, when someone loses a job, who do they usually go to? The employment office. It's funded by the government. There's like an actual problem here. The reason why that they do that. Number one, this enables people, okay? If they don't go through this process, they are enabled. They are entitled. It's actually a feeling of entitlement. I don't mean to, go super political on us here, but this is the truth. And the reason why we do this is, and this is like in a nutshell, of course there's a variety of different circumstances, but a whole bunch of people nowadays aren't very religious. So that band is kind of like eliminated, because now I still think in the United States, I'm an optimist, and I think that still in the United States we are still pretty faithful people. Even some of the people that might not attend a church regularly are still pretty faithful. I think as a whole in our country we are. But worldwide, especially globally, a lot of people don't have this. The other thing is our friends. Image is everything in our society, what we look like to other people. And we don't ever want to appear like we need help, right? Or that we have a problem. And so a lot of times people won't go to their friends, especially if it's something like a big thing. Unless they're people who are already here, people who are already using the government, they have no problem telling all their friends about how their life's so messed up. Okay, so it's a funny thing how we've done that. And I suggest to you that there is a way that is humble and still self-respecting to talk to our family and friends. What about our family relationships? Our family relationships as a society, this is the one that bothers me the most, are really struggling. we just don't turn to each other, and people will say, well, I don't have anything to help you. I don't have any means. Don't bug me. I can't handle my own thing. And everyone is worried about their own thing. And so, and family relationships are very dysfunctional. So the self feels like they're left with the government. And the people who won't turn to the government, because there's many of those, they get pretty down. Like suicide rates are always rising, right? There's a lot of depression, a lot of struggles and troubles. The self gets pretty darn frustrated and things look pretty bleak. And that's where we're at today. This band right here, this family band, could change everything. The reason why the family band could change everything is because the family actually trains the self. And the family, if it's doing its right thing, training the self, will also strengthen the community and the friends. It ends up bleeding outward. So then this becomes a ripple effect. And the government then becomes less corrupt, less selfish, and more focused on allowing the people to govern themselves, which is what our society was meant to be. Anyway, I'm sharing that with you because I want you to see the power of one family teaching one person this lesson. It makes a huge difference in our society. So how do we do that? That's the question. We do that by training the heart. So there is a wonderful little story, and this is a story, it's a Lamplighter book. I don't know if you've seen it. It's called Teddy's Button. Little old thing. I love this story. In Teddy's Button, we see little Teddy. He's a little guy, probably 7 or 8 years old, and he has some behavior problems. So he's kind of naughty. He teases people. He doesn't follow through with what his mom wants him to do all of the time. He does some things that are kind of bad, like he'll see some little guy, some old man in the community fishing along the bank, and he's like asleep, and he'll go and like tangle up his lines or like steal his fishing net or or something like that, and bother this guy. So he's back in those days that would be considered a very delinquent, naughty child. And so in this story, Teddy's father is at war, and he has given him one of the buttons from his war uniform. And Teddy shows everyone this button and brags about how his dad is a warrior. Well, one day Teddy's pastor pulls him aside and says, Teddy, how would you like to be a warrior like your dad? And Teddy's like, oh, I want to be a warrior like my dad. And he says, okay, well, you could be a warrior for God. You can be on God's army, and you can help people for God. And Teddy gets all excited about this and says, how am I going to do it? And his really wise pastor says, well, the first thing that you have to do is you've got to recognize that you have a shoulder angel and a shoulder devil, okay? Have you ever seen those little, like on TV, or not TV, the computer, like YouTube, there's like this show called Studio C, and they have this shoulder devil, it's hysterical. Anyway, this like shoulder devil and shoulder angel that calls, okay, anyway, that's a tangent, but it's really great if you're going to teach kids about it. Okay, so it used to be Tom and Jerry always had the devil and the angel, and we grew up seeing this. This is a really common thing. Well, nowadays that's not so common to see in cartoons and stuff anymore. The whole idea of choosing between what's the right and what's the wrong. They just act on impulse. Everything's impulse in modern television nowadays. Anyway, so the pastor says you need to name the shoulder devil. Name it. You got to give it a name. Some versions of the book call it Ipsy. That's the version we have. Some versions call it Bully, which kind of makes sense. Anyway, so Teddy names his little shoulder devil Ipsy, and the pastor says, okay, now, whenever Ipsy tells you something you know is wrong, you have to tell Ipsy no, that you will not do it. And then you have to make other choice, the right choice. If you can learn to do this, then you can be a warrior for God, right? So Teddy decides this is a great task, right? So he's going through his daily life. He wants to tease the neighbor girl, and all of a sudden he's like, oh no, Ipsy, I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna tease her. And he walks away, and he keeps telling Ipsy, no, Ipsy, I'm not gonna make that bad choice. I'm gonna make the right choice. And then in the end, I'm not gonna ruin the end of the story for you, but then you see Teddy become this warrior, and how fabulous it is. It's a super fun story to read to kids if you want to get a hold of that one. But essentially, when a person has a change of heart, it's that simple. It's as simple as it's choosing to follow Ipsy or choosing to follow your little shoulder angel, what's good and what's right and what's true. So of course that always has to be talked about, and the children need to be sensitive to it. They have to know what it feels like when something's right and what it feels like when something's wrong. And how do we teach that? We teach them what their will is. The will is super important. Without the will, you can't choose self-government. You can't really choose anything without your will. That's your strongest part of who you are. If you've ever been like a runner or anything like that, you know that. When you're feeling like you have nothing left to give, you don't make it to the finish line because you thought, I need to just lift one more foot. You actually thought, I can do this. I must do this, and you will yourself to the end. In childbirth, ladies, come on, we do this, okay? The will is super strong if we're willing to use it. And honestly, in childbirth, there is nothing left. So that's all we have. So we have to use it. And if we know that, then we can teach our children, right? There's a wonderful poem by Louisa May Alcott that sums this up, and I would like to read it for you. It says, it's called A Little Kingdom I Possess. And it says, a little kingdom I possess, where thoughts and feelings dwell, and very hard I find the task of governing it well. For passion tempts and troubles me, a wayward will misleads, and selfishness its shadow casts on all my will and deeds. How can I learn to rule myself, to be the child I should, honest and brave, nor ever tire of trying to be good? How can I keep a sunny soul to shine along life's way? How can I tune my little heart to sweetly sing all day? Dear Father, help me with the love that casteth out my fear. Teach me to lean on thee and feel that thou art very near. That no temptation is unseen, no childish grief too small. As thou with patience infinite dost soothe and comfort all. I do not ask for any crown, but that which all may win, nor try to conquer any world except the one within. Be thou my guide until I find, led by a tender hand, thy happy kingdom in myself, and dare to take command. These types of poems are all throughout the old days. This was really common to understand that the self had to be trained, and that the self had a responsibility for learning to use that will to conquer themselves. Yes?
What was the name of that again?
A Little Kingdom I Possess. Would certainly be worth memorizing if you memorize poetry. We memorize poetry at our house one poem a week. We say it 3 times every day, and then usually by Friday we have it memorized. Unless it's something super long, it could take a couple of weeks. We memorize all kinds of things, the Declaration of Independence and different documents and proclamations and stuff. So anyway, I just want to talk about a couple of pieces of this poem. One is she talks about selfishness. She diagnoses the problem is selfishness. Why do I get so selfish, she wonders. Why does this keep troubling me? How come? And it's because Ipsy, right? She didn't say Ipsy in here, but it's the whole idea. She gets tempted to do something. And then she says that she just wishes she could tune her little heart. She knows it has something to do with her heart, that if her heart desires to do good, then she will be in tune She will be in harmony. She will be able to sing sweetly all day. And she talks about ruling herself, how she recognizes she must rule and conquer. She uses the word herself. She also uses the word soothe. She said, does soothe and comfort all. I love the word soothe. The word soothe means to soften. It also means truth. It comes from the Old English of sooth, and if you like to study Shakespeare like I do, then forsooth means in truth. So soothe means to soften with the truth. So soothe is soften with the truth as well. It's just changed in the way that it's written. So if we soothe our children, if they soothe themselves, they are softening themselves with the truth. Isn't that something? I love that image. Because you know, when a person makes a bad decision, when they go against their parents' will, they are not following a truth. They are buying into a lie. And oftentimes they create one in their own mind, actually, that they fall into. Samuel Smiles, who is an author, he wrote the book Character. I don't know, can you all hear? I think she's gonna get quiet. Okay, anyway, Samuel Smiles wrote a book called Character. And in that book, and by the way, it's a fabulous book if you want to read it. He said, the government of oneself is the only true freedom for the individual. Self-control is only courage under another form. I love the idea of courage. I want to have courageous children. There's a poem that we memorized in our family called Courage. It was written by an anonymous author. And it goes like this. Courage isn't a brilliant dash, a daring deed in a moment's flash. It isn't an instantaneous thing, born of despair with a sudden spring. It isn't a creature of flickered hope or the final tug at a slipping rope. But it's something deep in the soul of man that is working always to serve some plan. That is what courage is. And I love it. Because it says that yes, people do courageous things, like that final tug at a slipping rope, or saving the child from the river, or whatever. That people do these courageous things. But the people that do them didn't just have one moment of courage. Their courage was formed from the beginning. They were forming it all along. The man who will jump into a river to save a drowning child and put his whole life in jeopardy has already decided ahead of time that he will protect the weak, that he will save the children, and he has already done courageous things that would push himself to the limit. He has told himself, no, I won't watch that. No, I won't do that with my time. I will do it with things that are the more important. That is what that man has already done before he becomes the hero that made the news. Courage is something that's already there. And what Louisa May Alcott was asking is she was asking to find where she could have that courage. How can she develop it? She knew that if she could just govern herself and conquer herself once, she would develop the courage she needed to continue to do it. So, we need to understand how we work. How does this self-government process actually happen within ourselves? First, to understand how this works, we have to have a basic understanding of our physiology, okay, our souls. Second, we have to have a vision of what we're hoping to accomplish, and then last, we have to train the heart for success. So those are the three things that we're going to do. First, understand our physiology. Second, have a vision of what we're going to do with it, because a person does not make a change without a reason why they want to make a change. That's the vision. And then third is actually learn the skills that they need to train the heart. So physiology, I'm not a nurse and I'm not a doctor, and I'm not going to give you a full course on physiology. That would take a really long time. Usually has to deal with how the body works, and most people stop at at a biological level, okay? But if you read a book called Our Home by William Sargent that was written back at like turn of the century, late 1800s, early 1900s, he says in there that mothers should have a detailed understanding of physiology before becoming mothers, because he reasons if mothers do not know how the body of their child works, then the upbringing of the child is in danger. The mother's ignorance will endanger the health of the child, and she will also not adequately be able to train it physically or morally. So he joins the moral and the physical together. He says if mothers don't know how the body of the child works, meaning the moral and the physical part of the bodies, then the child is in danger. So that your children are not in danger, I'm going to share that with you today. Okay? C.S. Lewis, in his essay, Men Without Chess, which is in a book called The Abolition of Man. If you haven't read it, it's incredibly insightful. I just love C.S. Lewis and his line of logic. I could read him forever. But he talks in Men Without Chess about how this was the mid-1940s, he said, so right around World War II, he said that the world was in danger of being taken over by men without chess. What he meant was men without hearts, or men without spirits. That people just focused on body and physical everything, and logic were going to take over the world, and were taking over the world. It makes me wonder if he were alive today what he would think about our society today, because certainly we've gone even further than then. And his warning should have been heeded, probably. He says we're made up of 3 parts, and I agree. C.S. Lewis says we have a body. The body does all of our feeling. That's our sensual side. There's our senses and our emotions. Emotions are attached to the body. They are a chemical thing oftentimes that happens. When we start to have a lot of an emotional response, it's because we've switched and we started firing with our chemicals in our brain. It starts to lead things in our body, creates adrenaline, that kind of thing. So that's one part of this. The other part of us is our logic. So our ability to rationalize, problem solve, think, compare, that kind of thing. So that's part number 2. And then the third part is our chest, or our hearts, or our spirits, whatever you want to call it. And that is where the will is rooted. And this is so easy to see. All of us have raised children in here, or seen children get raised. When they learn to walk, so think of a baby learning to walk, when they start to take those first steps, are they thinking, I need to balance on my feet, and then I need to lift up one foot, roll the other one while I put the heel down, and put the other one forward? Are they thinking all of those things? No. They don't have that. They're not even there with their logic yet at all, or even their understanding. You know what they're thinking? They're thinking, Mama, Mama. That's what they're thinking. It is their will almost entirely that propels them forward and trains their body. Their will to move forward trains their body. And then later, when they're much older, they learned what they did. Isn't that interesting? So that is how it all starts for us. Almost everything that we do is with our wills first. And we start out in a kind of an animal state, you know? We only have body, and but the one thing that we do have is our will, and our will conquers that body. Once our will conquers the body, then we can connect better to the people around us, and then we can actually master skill development afterward. So, it is important for us to realize there are 3 pieces working. When you are in bed in the morning and you're sleeping and you hear the alarm clock go off, beep, 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 and the first thought is, oh, and you hit the snooze, what really happened was your body did not like it, and it engaged the brain to rationalize probably multiple things in a split second of time about why you don't have to get up quite yet. And then it made the finger, or whatever, push the snooze button. That is a very basic understanding of how the body can control the mind. C.S. Lewis called the mind the puppet. And I like that, because basically the puppet, the mind, will follow either what the body says or what the will says, what the heart or the chest or the spirit or whatever you want to call it says. And so it is important for the person to realize that that heart voice is actually stronger and more powerful than that body voice. So if your heart voice conquers the brain, then you're laying in bed, you hear the alarm, beep, 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 and you think, oh, it's morning. Wait, Nicolene, you have to get up. If you don't get up, you won't have time to do this. You might not get a shower. You've got to get up. The whole day will fall apart if you don't get up right now. You already planned this. Don't go back on your plan. And then I turn it off, and I put my feet on the floor. That is the moment where the heart won. And the heart used the puppet for its rationalization. Because that's pretty much the job of the puppet. If people in society appeal to the puppet, which they do a lot, you can be so manipulated one way or another. Your children need to learn how they actually work. Samuel Smiles said again, I don't even know where I am in my notes, but I like this quote, so I'm going to read it to you. Samuel Smiles said, "Self-control forms the chief distinction between man and mere animal. There can be no true manhood without self-government." He says that is the difference. The difference is animals don't really have the same ability to choose and to use the heart voice like we do. We have a different capability, and our logic works different too. The way that we learn is more, advanced, I guess. Anyway, so I love that, because a person who does not self-govern then is just a mere animal, is basically what he's saying. So there's two different ways to live. You can have a physical life and follow all of your cravings and sensual desires and all those kinds of things. Or you can have a moral life and focus on what's right and wrong, what your purpose is, what you should do, what impact you might be able to have, and making sure that you're always checking that with what feels like the right thing at the time. Smiles also says self-government is the root of all virtues and moral freedom. Those who give in to impulses, so impulses, that's the moral living. I mean, not the moral, the physical living. Those who give in to impulses are adrift at sea. Think of how you can be so manipulated, because your physical desires or impulses could change by the minute. Those are also the people that feel like everything outside of them is really what's controlling them. They have tons of excuses because, oh, well, that person did that to me. Well, I didn't get to do that. Well, I didn't, this and this. And everything has control over me. That's a physical living, and then you only have to just have an impulse or a reaction to whatever it is. But a moral life says, I have full control, and I'm looking at what's happening around me. I can acknowledge that that just happened, but I choose for it not to have an effect. That is a strong, moral, emotionally strong type person. If the body is overly pampered, okay, so if you, I don't want you to misunderstand this, be nice to your children and everything, but if the body is overly pampered, which means the body has a desire, so you fulfill the desire. I'm too cold, oh, here's a jacket. I'm this, I want orange juice. If everything is overly pampered, then you actually have the habit of becoming morally deformed. So in the book Our Home, they use this term. They use the term moral monstrosities, and they use the term morally deformed. What they say is, they said, let's just assume the worst moment that we could devise in the life of a child. And this is the story they came up with. The mother tells the son to go take a bag of apples over to the neighbor. And the son won't do it. He doesn't go. William Sargent says that boy is morally deformed because he's not honoring his parents. That's like as low as he could go. Isn't that amazing? What would you think of our society? Oh, we're like all messed up, right? And the things that we put up with. I saw a woman the other day at a soccer game. Her child was like, "Rah!" like in her face, and she's like, I'm thinking, oh, my modern progressive, correct the child. He's screaming for it. He wants the correction. Give it to him. He kept coming back at her and back at her again. He'd go and he'd like rest from his anger for a second. Then he'd come back and do it again. And I thought, okay, Mommy, he's wanting some attention. Correct the boy. That's what he needed. But she wouldn't correct him. Instead, she chose to ignore it, which a lot of people think is a super good idea, especially in public, probably because if she would have addressed it, she probably would have turned into a monster herself. Anyway, they go on with the story and say, or William Sargent goes on with the story and he says, let's say this boy found out his sister had to take the bag of apples because he didn't. He would be so racked with guilt because his sister had to do the task. This was at a time when boys actually thought their sisters were the most virtuous, the most moral people that they ever knew. And they were trained to protect their sisters' names and their virtues at all costs, and to care for those women. He said that boy would be so racked with guilt, he would probably damage his life if he didn't set it straight. I was like, holy cow! Have we come a long way? That was the worst thing I could think of. So let's just embrace it. People around us are morally deformed. Let's decide to do something about that. The reason they're morally deformed is because they don't know they have three parts. They don't know which part should be leading. They don't know where they're going, and they don't have the skills what to do. So number one is the physiology. I think we've covered that fairly well. Number two is the vision of where a person is going. Why should your child even care about self-government? What do they get out of it? Saturday, I have a fantastic story that I'm going to be sharing toward the end, I think around 2 or something, on Saturday, where I talk about the way to help your children get a personal vision of why they should care about self-government. I don't have time to go into that whole story right now because it's kind of long, and I want to make sure we get to skill development. But I do want to talk about having a family vision. So family visions are really powerful. Our family years ago made what we called our 20-year vision. So this was a picture of what kind of a family we wanted to be 20 years from now. In fact, let's just go ahead right now and get a 20-year vision for you so that you can share it with your spouse and you can create a vision for your family that will help your children and you remember why you would make these changes in the way that you're going to communicate with each other when you leave the workshop today. So close your eyes. Now I know some people are better at getting vision in their mind than others. But if you need to write it down, you can write it down if you can't envision it in your head. But I want you to close your eyes and think in your mind about your favorite holiday. What is that day? What do you normally do on that day? Now I want you to think of you on that holiday 20 years from now. before certain things are around. What foods might be there? What does it smell like? Now think of those people that are there, those people in your family that are there with you 20 years from now. Are there any additional people that could be there? I would imagine for some of your families that would be the case. Could some of your children be married or have children of their own? What could that scene possibly look like? You don't have to go concrete and name all their kids and tell them all that and everything. Just, a picture. And what will the conversation be like at that gathering? What sort of things are going to be important for your family to talk about that will make a difference in their lives? Now I want you to take in your mind that feeling. Do you feel that feeling that's there? What's that feeling? See if you can label it. Now let's take this vision and we're going to come into the present time 2 weeks from now. Let's have our family 2 weeks from now. What do we look like? On a Sunday afternoon. And we have that same feeling. What does it feel like? What will we be doing in our house? What does it look like? Now what is the one thing that has got to change before or in order for you to get that feeling at your house 2 weeks from now and 20 years from now? Okay, open your eyes. Write down that one thing. Did we lose anyone? Anyone sleep? You did good. Okay. Write down that one thing, whatever it happens to be, that you know you've got to change. And if you can, write down a few notes, a few things to remind you of that picture. Because you're going to want to share your picture with your spouse and see if you guys can unify on one vision so that you can share it with your children. You can tell it to them as a bedtime story. Hey, remember 20 years from now when we have this Christmas party and it's going to be like this? I don't know what holiday you pick, but our family, we pick Christmas. We love Christmas. And our vision, me and my husband are sitting around the dinner table with my children and all their spouses. And me and my husband are holding hands under the table, which symbolizes how in love we are with each other, that we've worked on our couple relationships so much that it's stronger then than it ever has been. And there's grandchildren playing over in the family room area, and they're talking to each other about what they're going to give Jesus that year for Christmas, because that's a tradition that we have in our family. And we all do the nativity together, and the children act out, and we do this little game called Little Jack Horner. And then me and my husband gather all of the grandchildren around us, and we look into the big eyes of these children, and we share with them stories of the past and inspiring things about the future. Oh, one important thing too is around the dinner table, the adults are all talking about how they are living their missions in life, or what God intends for them to do in this world to make a difference. And we're talking about the latest great books that we've read, because those are conversations that happen in our home. We read classics and we discuss mission, and what people in the classics are living mission all the time. This is part of our culture that we're creating in our homeschool and our home every day. Anyway, as we look into the eyes of these little children, the little children see what it means to live a life that is fulfilled. They see into the eyes of a person who has dedicated herself to something greater than just her, and who sacrificed in order to make the world a better place. Those little people with those big eyes are the things that stick out to me and my husband. We do everything we do, every communication with our children, in order to become those grandparents. That's what we want. We know every moment won't be perfect along the way, but if we can focus on becoming becoming the grandparent and having the impact even on the grandchildren, that means that the relationship and impact with the children has to already have been established such that they would then be passing on those same ideas to their children as well. Create a vision, share it with your children as a reason why you must make some changes in your home. And use the vision. So sometimes when my children have been, kind of at each other, a little contention or something, then I'll tell them, I'll say, okay, stop, you guys, stop talking. Do you feel that feeling right now? Is that the same feeling of our Christmas party that's going to be happening in such and such time on such and such day, and when we're going to do this? Is it the same feeling? And they're like, oh no, Mom, sorry. And I'll say, let's talk about what we need to do to fix this problem. It gives them a reason to care about it. So the third part that we need to talk about is we need to talk about actually teaching them the skills that they need to govern themselves. In order for a person to learn self-government, you need two things. They need to learn these two things, but your environment has to have these two things. The right kind of tone and the right kind of structure. I want to spend the rest of the time talking about how you can create the right tone and the right structure in your homes in order to make an environment where the will of the person or the heart of the person will be transformed. That they will be changed from a person who desires to rebel to a person who desires to unite with their parents. A person who desires to respect. By the way, respect is misunderstood. A lot of people think that, people come to me with two things. They say to me, my children don't respect me. And then the second thing is, I'm pretty sure I'm not respecting my children. Would you agree those two things are important? They're a little misunderstood though. They are important. In order to respect, you understand when they don't respect you because you know you're the parent and they're the child. You get that, right? There's like a hierarchy. But what does it mean to respect a child? Does that mean you treat them like a friend?
That means to acknowledge that they have feelings, acknowledge that they have.
Kind of. Yeah, that's actually what most people think. But it's also to acknowledge that they're a learner. Roles are vital. If your children don't understand what their role is, that they are the child, and that means they're a learner, and you're the parent, and that means you're a teacher. That is self-evident. God set that up. There is nothing we can do to change that. That doesn't mean we don't occasionally learn from our children, but the idea is you're the leader. It's a self-evident leadership structure that was set up at birth. If we do not acknowledge that they are the learner, we can't actually teach them and we can't respect them. Respecting a child is to correct them all the time. To correct them when things go wrong is a sign of respect. Now that doesn't mean you do it in anger though. We've already addressed that, right? That's where this tone comes in. You gotta have the right feeling when you do the correcting. So I'm gonna get a drink, switch my papers, and then we're gonna talk about how to create the right tone and the right structure for changing that home environment into a self-government training ground, okay? Before we jump into this next bit on tone and structure, I want to just take a few minutes and see where you guys are at. So I want to see maybe it doesn't even have to be you guys, remember, it can be your friends. But what types of things do you see that are problems that you encounter in your parenting? And let me just answer some of those questions right now. Because lots of times I go right to the last Okay.
But I noticed, like, I'm just not, where does that come in competition, like, I don't know how to stop it, I don't know.
So rivalry with each other, is that what you mean?
Who's faster, who's smarter, who's.
Oh,
there's a lot
okay.
of that, like, oh, I did that better, you know.
Right. So they're trying to get identity based upon being better than somebody else or comparing to somebody else.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe that's the case. Do you know what? So first off, that particular, okay, so I guess you all heard, but just in case, she has some boys that are in competition with each other on a regular basis. And that goes back to a family vision thing. I don't know if you have a family vision for your family, or if you have a certain way that it's supposed to feel at home, but that would be contrary to that. So if you have a certain feeling that is supposed to be in your home, a tone that's supposed to emanate there, a spirit of love maybe, I don't know what you call it, but whatever you call it, you need to have the same term every time. And if that feeling is not there, then they are not following an instruction, or they're not accepting a no answer. You could go either way. So the no answer is we don't chase that feeling away. We keep that feeling in our home. That's part of who we are. It goes back to that family vision. Or the instruction side of it is, hey, an understood instruction in our family is that this is our family vision. This is the feeling that's supposed to be here. If you're comparing yourself to another person, how can you have a spirit of love in your home? You can't. And selfishness, it's a boundary thing. You don't want a person to be in bondage to selfishness. That doesn't mean that they should, competitiveness, I mean, like some people are more competitive than others. And lots of times, especially boys are really competitive, right? It's like testosterone or something. But anyway, I think you can explain that when you compete, it's not really that you're competing with somebody else, but that you're competing with yourself. It is a self-government moment when you're in competition. And if you always think about it being a moment against an adversary, and your adversary is not just your own weakness, then you are looking at the world through a reactive lens instead of a proactive lens. So a really powerful competitor is the one who recognizes they're competing with themselves, not with somebody else. When they compete with themselves, then their victory is more marked than the one who competes with somebody else. Because honestly, a person who competes with somebody else is in a totally, they're in a passive state, aren't they? Because their happiness is totally dependent upon the outcome of an event. That's pretty sad to put yourself in that situation. I'm not saying sporting events are bad. I know there's like teams and all that, guys. Anyway, but I was kind of competitive myself, but I think it's more productive when you're competitive against yourself. So if them understanding self-government, I mean, just explain it to them. Explain about the body, the mind, the heart. Explain about how the purpose is for you to conquer you. Read them Louisa May Alcott's poem. Talk to them about the family vision and teach them to follow instructions and accept no answers. And when they are competing with themselves, or not with themselves, with each other, then and they're aggressive about it, then they need to be corrected and they need to earn an extra score, even for that. So good question. Anybody else? Yes?
Okay. I've read your book. We've had family home evenings on it. We've got a family vision.
Good.
We've tried to manipulate it all in.
Yeah.
Well, right now I only have my youngest son. He's the only one at home.
Okay.
And
How old is he?
11.
Okay.
And he, as you kind of put it, rules the roost with my husband.
Oh, okay. So your husband's modern progressive?
Yes.
Okay.
And he lets him pretty much do anything he wants, including
Okay.
jumping on him,
Oh,
playing
so he
with
has some
him.
boundary issues?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And I keep trying to, and my husband agrees that we need to do the self-government stuff, but he doesn't follow along. And since he doesn't follow along, it's like my son doesn't have any respect for him. And so whenever he needs disciplined, it's always put to me.
Right, right. Your situation, sadly, is super common.
I know.
I bet you there's at least one other woman in here that says, I sure hope my husband cares about this when I get home. I'm sure. That's why I actually do couples retreats.
I even made notes in the book for him, and
You
I
don't read every page.
I have all these sticky notes throughout the book. And then I made notes on a.
Did you get the audio, like, I mean, I don't
No,
know
I
if they'll
didn't
do
get the
audio,
audio.
because we do have like an audio of this.
Okay.
And I mean, it's not an audio book, but it's the closest I have to an audio book where
Yeah.
it goes through all of it. And so if he's not gonna read it, like, he might be an auditory learner, and so
Yeah.
maybe he just needs to, like, be on a car drive.
Well, I think it's
Go on a
like
trip.
he gets home from work and he doesn't want anything to do with work anymore or anything, and he
And that's
figures
super
that's kind
common,
of a-
actually. Dads have
Yeah.
a tendency to go, I'm done work, I'm done with effort, I want to just,
And that's what he seems to do.
yeah, and it's common, it's super common. He hasn't bought in the same, he probably hasn't even projected in his mind ahead to what he wants, except for in the minute, he wants peace and not work. Okay, so
Yeah.
he's living in the moment instead of making a vision for his future really and
Well, he
focusing on
plans
that.
on retiring in 2 years, and so we really talked about what we want to do,
Right, right.
but he,
It takes initiative though and his
Yeah.
own self-government to do that. If you can, come to Cancun. If you
Yeah,
can,
I'd love to.
come to a couples retreat if you can. Some of you that have your spouses here, you're super lucky because then
Yeah.
you guys are on the same page and you can talk about this stuff. So that's good. Are you not sure yet? Okay, well anyway, we'll get to that. Don't worry. We'll make it good, I promise.
okay, so how can I end up making him,
You need to,
he
you
can't
need
make
to
it
correct,
anyway.
do you know,
Not
you
my
can't make
husband,
your
my
husband.
son.
Okay, climbing on somebody else is a boundary issue.
Yeah.
He needs to learn boundaries.
But we give him
And-
consequences, and he goes and he does the consequence and then goes right back and does it again.
Well, you have to
And so
correct
then-
him. You have to correct him every time, but if his
Yeah.
heart hasn't fully changed, he might be out of instructional control even if he's not angry. A
Yeah.
person can be out of control and their heart can be turned from you even when they're completely silent and staring at you. I'm sure
Well, and
that's-
then he'll look at me and tell me to stop yelling, and I'm not.
Okay, you're
and-
tolerating way too much. Your tolerances are way too high.
Okay,
That's one thing. You don't talk back to him when he talks back to you.
okay.
That's
He
okay.
goes
You
and
say, it
sits in
seems
his.
to me that you want to tell me something, I want to know what that is, but
Okay.
we need to choose to be calm first, then we can talk about it. You do
Okay.
the correction, if he talks back, you can say, I can see you wanna tell me something, but you need to be willing to
So I need to
follow
go
an
back to that
instruction,
part.
you just go right back to you not following an instruction. You have something to say, you can't hear what that is, and then you can follow an instruction. Following an instruction is the sign that they can be taught. They have to be able to do all 5 of the steps.
Okay,
Do not tolerate just 4. All 5.
all fine. Okay.
Yeah, we'll talk about that at length.
Okay.
Any other questions? There was another one? I
I
don't. We'll just go down the line and, okay.
I feel kind of like a hypocrite sometimes when I'm a parent because I tell my children, you know, they need to do these things that
Uh-huh.
I'm not very good at, and which a lot has to do with self-governance. I'm like, okay, kids, we have to start right here and do this. We have to have the beds made and everything at by 9 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, oh look, I got the newspaper today. Let me just, it's 9 o'clock. Everybody, you get, you know. And so I feel a little bit.
So you're kind of a live in the moment person.
I am. I tend
Yeah.
to be a live in the moment person. So I guess as my question is, then I tend to kind of go to the extreme of, you know, I start getting really angry because my kids aren't doing what I want to do right now. But then I kind of tend to be late and stuff like that and do other things. And so I feel like I'm sort of swimming, kind of just sort of floundering and then kind of going and floundering. And it's kind of hard to know how to.
Some people flow that way, just so you know. You can adjust it. It requires self-government for yourself. Adaptability is a really great thing, actually. People learning how to be adaptable is a really great thing, but also staying on task is a really good thing. And so you probably need to determine what times of the day are we gonna be adaptable, and, or when is it that we're adaptable? Is it when a newspaper comes? No. We're gonna be adaptable when all of a sudden a neighbor needs some assistance, or, you know what I mean, something like that. That's when we're gonna be adaptable and things are gonna get messed up for the day a little bit. Or when somebody's sick, or when somebody's, whatever, then we're gonna be adaptable. And then, but otherwise, this is our basic structure. I always tell people who are just starting homeschooling, I always say, only 1 in 10 days is perfect. And that really is about the ratio. 1 in 10 days. But the idealistic parent who is school who works toward the ideal structure every day, if they work toward it every day and they get 1 in 10 days perfect, they actually still have more of an impact than the school would have. There's still more that's happening. So probably the other thing that you need to do is accept a no answer. You need to accept a no answer. When something goes off, you've got to then be adaptable, because if you're choosing to create anxiety within yourself, you need the power of calm. I have a CD out there called The Power of Calm. I'm not doing that class today. Normally I do if I had more time, but I'm not. And you might want to listen to that. You need to focus on your own calmness. Calmness is a super important part of the tone. Whenever there's any problem that occurs, calmness is number one. First calmness, then comes correction, then comes teaching. So teaching for the next time, okay? Making sure there's not a problem again. Calmness first. Without calmness, which if your son's talking back, he's not calm. Without calmness, you can't even correct or teach anything. You can't parent. And so you have to make sure you have your own calmness. And calmness doesn't look like just not talking. Calmness is like, I'm okay. This doesn't bother me, okay? Let's move down the line. We're going to take you two ladies there, and then we're going to move on with the rest of the material. Yes?
No, I was just saying that I wanted to hear more about the tone instruction thing.
Oh, yeah, well, let's go then. Okay, yeah?
I'm wishing I could rewind 20 years, because I have a 22-year-old and I'm looking and going, that's not the mold I was going for.
Of course.
And an 18-year-old and a 14-year-old. So the 14-year-old, you know, I feel like I still have some molding and teaching to do. But what about the older kids? Is it too late to teach this kind of thing in self-government,
No.
even as they are becoming adults? And how do you do that without them feeling like you're still trying to mother them? Because it's not my job to mother a 22-year-old. I'm still his mom.
Well,
but he's trying to, you know, he's breaking free because he's an adult, but.
I mean, he's legally an adult. But he would be incredibly naive to give up this ring with me. Why don't you draw him a picture? And why don't you teach him about calmness? In the Power of Calm class, I talk about the 4 different ways of communicating. That could be revolutionary for somebody whose logic is fully engaged. So have them, you know, go on a car ride and you listen to the Power of Calm, and they're with you on a family trip or whatever happens to be, or talk about it and be like, this is so awesome. I wish I was this way with you. I'm sorry I wasn't. You got to listen to this so you don't make my same mistake. I mean, there's so many things you can do. The other thing is that you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be in the act of doing these 2 things for yourself even, and you will become a different person. And they will see it. You all of a sudden feel more safe, and they will feel like they want to talk to you more. Draw a picture. I'm going to draw you one picture, and then we're going to go on with the whole rest of the presentation about the tone and structure, okay? Look at our board. It's so pretty. Okay, so this is one of my favorite pictures to draw. This is a picture of a wagon wheel. And this applies no matter the age of your children, okay? So, a wagon wheel has this part in the middle, the hub, okay? The hub is your core values, your principles, your beliefs, things like that, okay? Then all the spokes that go out are things that you would teach them, like you would teach them respect and hygiene and manners and math and whatever you're going to teach them. There's a zillion of things that we teach. The reason we teach these things are because, and you see how they're rooted in the core values, because there's some reason. We have some belief or some value we believe that requires this teaching, okay? And so the teaching is all rooted in there. If we try to teach something that we don't fully believe or have value in, it won't stick anyway. It always is a fruitless teaching. If we hate math, really hate it, and think there's no point of it, and we try to teach it to our kids, guess what? It's not going to stick. We have to fall in love with it too, otherwise they won't. This is just how it goes. But this isn't a full wagon wheel yet. There's this band, the rim that goes around the outside, and this rim is the relationship band. The relationship holds all of the teaching into the core values and principles. So, as a mother of children who are older children, you are going to make sure, oh, that's not a very good circle. Anyway, you are going to make sure that this band is intact. You would hate to be missing a piece, wouldn't you? Because then that would be really hard to drive that relationship, to do any of that teaching. It's not going to hold together. It's not going to be firm. You want to have your relationship constantly worked on. And when you focus on your relationship with them, you don't focus on just facilitating for them and giving and them and that kind of thing. Although there's a few things where you give and you're charitable and stuff, but it's a full real relationship. You talk about things that matter and you connect with them in a deep way. And so let's talk about the tone now so that we can figure out how to do that. Because the tone is where the deep connection happens. And a person, when they correct someone or influence anyone in a certain way, they must be able to have a deep connection. Your children should feel more connected to you during and after a correction than before. It should be a good experience for them. It should feel like they were liberated, even if they push back at first some. Your strong-willed children are going to be the best ones at learning self-government. They really will. They'll give you pushback first. They'll give you a run for your money, and they'll test your consistency. But when you have proven yourself consistent and proven yourself calm and that you're following a certain structure, they will see the truth of it and they will be the best at it. That's what always happens. I go to people's homes because people will pay me to come to their homes and to stay with them for 3 or 4 days and to teach their family self-government. And the ones that the parents are always the most worried about are always the ones that are the best at it by the time I leave. They're always the ones that are like, done, I see how this benefits me. Because they're like I was when I was 14. They see the truth of it and they move on. So I want to share with you, yes?
What age are generally children old enough to see this and to understand
Oh, really early too?
the cause and effect in my choice?
Yeah.
besides the-
Yeah, my own children were raised, learning it and doing it. And then the foster children I had were all older, of course, 12 to 18. So yeah.
Yeah, I wondered when you're
spectrum.
raising them from the beginning, how old
Yeah,
can they
like,
get it?
I mean, honestly, they can usually see cause and effect when they're really young, even before they're verbal, especially if you're talking to them a lot and pointing it out, and especially if your tone is safe. Whenever mom gets agitated, you know how when you have a crying baby, if you're like, stop it, stop it, do they ever stop it? No, you have to be like, breathing. You have to get yourself calm and then they get calm. Have you noticed that? And so if you are calm and you have the right tone, even when they're little and having problems, then they just start seeing the truth of everything you talked about. So it is part, keeping yourself, right, in the right place. So we're going to fix 2 generations, maybe 3, okay? The first generation's you, second generation your children, third generation grandchildren, all right? Let's do that, yeah?
So how, you keep saying you have to be calm, but how do you teach yourself to be calm? Because
Darn, I have a whole class on that. I can't. They only scheduled me for 3 hours and they said we want these classes, so I was stuck. But maybe if I come back again, I'll do the Power of Calm, or I do have a CD of it out there, and I go through 6 steps for how to keep yourself calm.
for any, because even, I just find when they get more agitated, then
It's for
easy
you.
to get drawn into
The class
that.
is for the parent. The class is for the parent. I'm going to teach you stuff today for your kids, okay? So we'll help you with that. All right, I want to share with you 6 principles for how to make an effective family government. That's what we call our environment, is the family government. And that is, I'm going to breeze through these because I want to get to working on skills quite a bit, and I want to make sure we've got time. So the family government is the environment where self-government can be taught and learned. The first principle of an effective family government is family activities. A family absolutely must be doing things together on a regular basis. This strengthens the relationship band in our circle. So we have at least one family activity a week. You can have more. Family activities are open to anyone. It doesn't matter if the person has lost all their privileges, they've been out of control all the day. If they are calm and okay right then, even if they shouldn't have any privileges, they can do the family activity. This shows the child this is more important. Our family relationship is more important than one bad decision that you made. I remember a woman saying to me a number of years ago, she was talking about her son, she was very frustrated. And she said, I'm so frustrated with my son. I've taken away his birthday, I've taken away Christmas, and still he doesn't care. And I was like, well, I mean, you've taken away the two best times you could show him he matters to you. I mean, what's happening to your relationship if you're willing to do that? That's a manipulation, by the way. It's manipulating for pain, and it is a bully, aggressive, fear-based type of a thing to do. Anyway, so family activity is super important. You can still teach cause and effect of the family activity if a person has lost all their privileges and, like, let's say you planned ahead, because we always plan ahead for our family activities whenever possible. The reason why is because anticipation makes a more memorable experience. If you anticipate Christmas, you remember it more. I want our family activities to be memorable, so we anticipate them at least one day ahead of time if we can. That doesn't mean they're not valuable if you don't have time to anticipate. It's just good to do that. That way it's also labeled a family activity long before anybody loses their privileges. And that way it's not like you tried to manipulate a time for them to get out of their privileges. It's easier for them too, to see your consistency if the family activities are planned a little bit ahead of time. But during that time, let's say everybody else can have a snack, but the person who lost their privileges, they can't have a snack. They can still do the family activities like go roller skating or whatever the family planned to do, but if the snack wasn't planned, then they don't get to have the snack that maybe everybody else could have. So see, they still could actually lose something during that time. Anyway, I could go into a lot of detail about family activities, but I don't want to spend all of my time there today. It is just really important to have them as a family and to start focusing on building that relationship deliberately. Because if you're like me, when I had some of my troubled children with foster children living in my home, I would be correcting the whole day long. You can't have just negative interactions with your children. There's got to be things where there's positive that's happening. Number 2 is acceptance. There's multiple different ways to look at the term as acceptance in relation to parenting. One thing is, when something bad happens, accept it. Accept that it happened. Important part of your tone. It's going to be very hard to be calm if you feel like something was personal that somebody else did. If somebody told you a lie, don't take it personally. If you find out your son's doing porn, don't take it personally. Don't be grossed out by him. If you do, you can't help him. If it's about you, if those interactions are about you, you can't help him. So you have to accept it happened. That doesn't mean you have to accept the behavior. No, we're going to fix the behavior. But you need to say, oh, they spilled a whole bucket of rice on the floor. That happened. And you have to be willing to be okay with that. The other thing is, children need criticism. They need to know how to accept criticism. This is very healthy. But part of acceptance of our children is also being careful about what we will and what we won't criticize, and not overloading our children with lots of needless criticism that could possibly be damaging. As I stand here today, I wear these fun shoes. They have springs on them. The reason why I wear springy shoes is because if I didn't, I would literally not be able to walk afterward. When I was 9 years old, I had an accident. I was paralyzed from the neck down. I broke my back at 5 places in my head. And after getting out of traction and miraculously being able to walk again, my mother noticed something about me that concerned her. My posture was a little bit funny. I would kind of poke out my belly like a lot of little kids do when they stand and they kind of sway back. Have you seen that? Anyway, I used to do that. I was 9 years old. It's very age appropriate for a 9-year-old, but she thought that this was something that was related to my back injury. And so she would constantly come to me and tell me, Nicolene, stand up straight, strengthen your tummy muscles, suck it in, tuck it in. And so I would suck it in and tuck in my tushy. And I would try to stand up straight because I thought something looked wrong with me because I had an accident too. Then I would go to ballet class and they would say, this is proper ballet posture. You tuck it in, suck it in, lift it up, drop it down, and there you go. And this was supposed to be the way that you were supposed to stand. And I remember standing there feeling like, this is so hard. This is so awkward. Is this the way regular people feel? I'm so messed up, I thought. So for years, literally until I got married and was pregnant with my first child, I would walk around sucking and tucking and hoping I looked normal because I thought I didn't. My mom had no idea that she was doing that to me. In the process of sucking and tucking all of those years, I created a problem. Most of my back is herniated, and I have one disc that's hyperextended that does all of the movement for my whole back. Because I just sucked it and tucked it for all that time. She had no idea I was processing like that. That's why I wear these shoes. If you tell your child, you're like a garbage disposal, or hey, you're getting a little chunky, what can that do? How are they going to process that? Right? You've got to be so careful about things that don't really matter. There are some things that don't. Set your standards. You can have dress standards and hair standards and things like that. But do not label your children. One of my foster children was a diagnosed kleptomaniac. That was her label. She had the hardest time letting that go because she identified with that because she had been told that was who she was for so many years. When we say things like that, we don't always know how they're processing, so be careful. Number 3 is love and mercy. Of course, we love our children, or we would not be here for this much time talking about how to improve the relationships with our children. And mercy. Well, actually, before mercy. Sometimes our children bug us, though. I don't know if you've had that happen to you. But they can, and that's because we're still human, and we have our own preferences. Remember, there's always preference, and then there's principle. We should act on the side of principle, not following preference all the time. But when we feel like we don't love our children, we actually can't reach them. They can't have a change of heart if they don't feel love from you. And I knew that when I was a foster parent. Every day, I knew my foster children would come home at 4 o'clock and walk in the door. At 3:45, I went to my room every day. I set like an alarm. 3:45, I would go to my room and I would pray to love them. I would ask God to give me more love for that child. Because if they couldn't feel my love, they could not have a change of heart. They couldn't. So if you don't love them, you won't help them. You've got to make sure that you fix that if you get bugged and fall out of love with one of your children. And that goes for anyone, really. Mercy. Mercy can be a great teacher. It should be something that is understood in your home, that you are merciful. Sometimes it's really merciful to correct a problem. If you let a problem go, that's not very merciful. You keep them in bondage. I teach something called the Rule of 3, which I hope to get to here in a few minutes. The Rule of 3 is when somebody is totally out of control, how you help them choose to be calm. It is pretty rigid. It's one of the most merciful things that I do. Because why would I leave my child in bondage? How could I be an advocate for that child if I left them stewing over something for a couple of days? You have to help them out of bondage. You've got to have skills for how to do that. Number 4, trust. You have to trust that every person is born good. I've never looked into the eyes of a baby and thought, what a wicked child. That like never happened. They're so fresh from God. They haven't done anything wrong. They are so beautiful. And they come with a desire to do good. Now I know some people sell their souls to the devil and they don't do good later on. But most every person, your mother-in-law, your sister-in-law, the neighbor with the loud dog, all of them want good things. They actually do. They want to do good. They might have selfish moments. But in order for us to help them have a change of heart, we have to remember their goodness and trust in that inside. I want you to all take just a brief moment, in fact 30 seconds, if you can find somebody to partner with. It doesn't even have to be anyone you know. But if it is someone you know, great. I want you to look in their eyes, no talking, and I want you to see into their souls, see their goodness. 30 seconds. Ready? Set. Go. And stop. I hope that was an enjoyable experience for you. I always love seeing people do that because they turn to somebody they wouldn't normally stare at for 30 seconds, and then they like go. They try not to. It's so funny. But the reason why is because your eyes are the windows to your soul. We're going to talk about 4 basic skills here in a minute, and those 4 basic skills, every single one of them, step number 1 is look at the person. You look at the person so you can think, I love you, to that person while you're talking to them, so that you can see their goodness, so that they can see truth. Have you ever noticed that when a person does not want to recognize the truth or the mistake that they've made, that they like look away? They're like, yeah, whatever. Or they'll look at you for a second and then roll their eyes. Have you seen that happen? It's because they don't want to see the good in you. If they just glimpse that tiny bit of goodness in you, the honesty and the truth that is in you, it is so hard to keep having an attitude problem. So hard. It's an amazingly powerful thing. Look at the person. It requires confidence and honesty. You can't look at people if you're not honest. So remember that. Our children aren't perfect, but we need to trust in their potential. I'm not making perfect children. My mantra for years has been, perfect children are impossible. That's why they're children. They're not perfect. I'm making joyful adults who know what their mission in life is and can't wait to fight for it and have strong relationships with God and family. That is what I'm creating in my home. A kind of an adult. So I don't have to take it personally if they mess up when they're children. I just have to get them toward those adulthood years. Number 5 is family economy. Family economy is your system of credits and debits in the home. So there's positive consequences, negative consequences, there's natural consequences, artificial consequences. So a natural consequence is like no one did the dishes, so the sink stinks. Most kids don't care about that. Okay? Maybe the 15-year-old daughter, but most people don't. So instead, you use an artificial consequence. You didn't follow the instruction to do your dishes, so you've earned an extra chore. Our favorite one is extra chores. Some people use timeouts and take away privileges and different things like that. You have to decide on that as a family. I'm going to tell you what we do. I try to talk about natural consequences like the sink stinks and stuff like that as often as possible, but we use synthetic consequences for multiple reasons. When they get older, they might transition to just seeing natural consequences. When they get to be, 17 or something, and they've been practicing self-government for all of these years, and they're really good at governing themselves, you might not have to actually use extra chores very often. You might just do a simple correction, You know, just now, I gave you an instruction to unload the car, and you looked at me, kept a calm face, voice, and body, said okay, and said you'd do it, but you didn't actually go and do it, and so you really weren't following an instruction. I need you to go and unload the car, and you need to be able to say okay, that's not following an instruction, and that would be enough. Their soul would be racked, just like the boy who felt racked because his sister had to take the bag of apples to the neighbor. If you teach them enough and use synthetic consequences enough, soon you don't have to. And they transition to natural consequences, but only after they are self-governing. And then their souls are in the right place to recognize the truth. So, synthetic consequences are also, I believe in repentance, quick repentance. I believe that if a person has a change of heart, they shouldn't have to have it follow around them all day. I feel like children, their lives are constantly in a state of motion, which means that if they make a mistake, they should be able to fix themselves from that mistake and move on. They should not be stuck in something for a long period of time just because I feel like I want them to really feel it. So we keep things pretty simple at our house. We mostly use work, and the reasons that we use work is because it's fast, like I said, and it's done, it's over. And like if you take away a consequence, or take away a privilege, like if you say, well, you can't have your Legos for the whole day. Well, then they didn't make their bed in the morning, and still at night they can't have their Legos. It's just kind of weird. The other thing is they didn't actually have to accept it. You took it. When a person has to do a chore, they have to accept it. They have to do something. A person can't learn self-government if it's your fault. It has to be something they recognize they have to fix, which means that the chores work out really nice for them having to do an action. So and Samuel Smiles, who, if you can't tell, is one of my favorite guys, he says that work is the antidote for a sick character. When a person won't follow an instruction from their parents or won't accept a no answer from their parents, that person's character is damaged. It's sick. So work is a great antidote for that sick character. We keep it simple at our house. Some people use all kinds of charts and things like that. If you want to, you can, but I found that most people can't stick to a chart system for more than 2 weeks. They're just meant for short-term things like potty training and stuff like that. So I like to stick to things that I can use forever, no matter if they're 2 or if they're 18. 4 things. 1 is extra chore. The other 3 are for what we call the rule of 3. This is only for when their heart really needs intervention and they are what we call out of instructional control, which means they're not going to do all 5 steps to following an instruction, which we're going to talk about in just a second here. So the first one that they can earn is a major maintenance. A major maintenance is a big chore. It's something that might take, a half hour. Or for a smaller child, it might be something that takes 10 or 15 minutes. Because for little teeny children, you're going to keep the chores age appropriate, right? So for a little teeny child, a regular chore might be put the blocks in the bucket. A major maintenance might be help mommy wash the bathroom sink, or fold the towels, or you know what I mean? There's more things. So major maintenance. Then the second one is sodas. That's a problem-solving exercise thing. I actually have a book on it out in the hall. It's in the book here, though, all about sodas. It's an acronym. Stands for situations, options, disadvantages, advantages, solutions. It's a way to problem solve something, and it's a written activity that they go through. If they are going out of control, they're obviously having a hard time problem solving, and we need to make sure that they do problem solving exercises so that they don't have the same problem in the future. Yes?
Age is not appropriate for.
When they're young, you can talk through them. In fact, in the book, I talk about another game. When they're really tiny, like maybe 3, we used to play a game called the What If game, which is a great precursor to learning sodas. And then honestly, as soon as they can talk with you and have a decent conversation, you can start having sodas. But when they write them themselves, of course, they wouldn't do that until they can write on their own. If they're younger and you talk them through, you can write it out for them so that they can see it all go out in its format. I'm not going to go into tons of that format today just because I don't know if we'll have time. We'll see if we get to the end if I have time. Then the third one is loss of privileges for 24 hours. Obviously, your 3-year-old is not going to lose privileges for 24 hours. So this is usually for kids. These 3 things are usually for kids ages like 6 or 7 and up, and loss of privileges for 24 hours for a 6-year-old is probably a little extreme, although some people do it, and their 6-year-olds just never choose it, and then it's fine. But you have to be willing to follow through. Loss of privilege means this, so you might want to adjust it. If you have a younger child, you might want to say loss of privilege for 2 hours, or 5 hours, or 12 hours, or whatever you think is appropriate for that child. But what loss of privileges for 24 hours means is this. It means no TV, no phone, no computer, no snacks, no friends, no Legos, no piano, no books, no nothing. Only they get to sleep at night for the recommended hours of the day, they get 3 meals, and then they get to do chores and problem-solving exercises. It's intense, and you never would go longer than 24 hours, ever. That's it, they know that, that's the threshold. You don't ever want to add up, to try and get more of an impact. They need to know what all the everything is. But you know what, after somebody picks that, unless they have like ODD or RAD or something and they're really addicted to raging, they might pick it more than a couple of times, but most people will pick it once or twice, and then they go, I'm not picking that again, I'm just gonna have a calm conversation with mom. Like, that's the options. Do I get calm and talk about it, or do I go completely out of control and end up having to accept 24 hours of hard labor and problem-solving exercises? And if they walk away from me when I'm talking to them, they know they are choosing to earn all 3 of those things. The children don't walk away. If they do, they're saying, I'm picking to be out of control, give me whatever you want. And they leave. And they know that. So you spell all of this out ahead of time. Okay, every bit of it. If the children are tiny, I use a version of timeout that I call a calm down spot. For the calm down spot, I notice, because see, number 1 is calm. They have to be calm. Okay, if they are not being, and that's why I use the rule of 3, which I haven't taught you yet, but now I've explained the consequences at least. For small children, like little toddlers, I will just teach them ahead of time. If you're sad, like, wah, or you're mad, or you're whiny, then mommy will say that we need to go to the calm down place. So then I'll say, Porter, we need to go to the calm down place. And then we take them to the calm down place, and they know they stay there until they are calm and ready to say, okay. Once they can say, okay, Mom, I'm calm, then I come back, I give them a big hug and a high five, and then I do a correction, which means they earn a little consequence, which is some little age-appropriate chore. I do the correction and the consequence, and we do teaching to make sure that we practice doing it the right way so that this sort of thing doesn't happen again. So that is how I handle it in a really brief way with timeout with little children. You teach it all ahead of time, you practice it, you role play it, so that when it happens, it's like, oh yeah, we did this. Oh yeah, I have to get happy and quiet, and then Mom will high five me and we'll have a big hug, and then we can talk about it, and then it will be over. And again, you don't take away their toys and stuff like that. That creates tons of anxiety for a 3-year-old, because for a 3-year-old, every day is like a week. I mean, that's just like forever, Okay, number 6 is family meetings. I'm just gonna briefly, if you're on this list, I'll send you a family meeting sheet, okay? The family meetings are, we have lots of meetings. We have 3 different kinds of meetings in our family. We go to church on Sunday, we come home, we have lunch, then we have couples meeting, which is a time where me and my husband talk about the issues relating to the family, and we talk about our weekly schedules, and we talk about each child and that kind of thing. And then we have a family meeting. My parents used to call this a family council, but in reality, when I was a kid, it was actually a family fight. And because we had attitude problems, and there was no structure, and there was no time limit. Those only take, couples meetings take 30 minutes, family meetings take 20 minutes tops. We keep them timed. Each person gets to lead the family meeting. Everybody gets to come to the family meeting. There's certain ways that we talk and vote on legislation in the family meeting. It's totally all spelled out in the book, and I'll send you a sheet on that. And then the 3rd meeting we have is mentor meetings. So those are individual private meetings with each child. So Mom and Dad talk with each child each week. We talk about their behaviors, their friends, their schoolwork. We help them set goals. It's very deliberate. Like I said, very planned, very parent-led. So we help lead them towards success for the next week and help them develop goals. So meetings are super important, especially that family meeting is sort of the central of everything that you do with teaching your children self-government and creating that environment in your home. It is the place where the family checks up on how you're doing with that feeling that's supposed to exist in the home, how you're checking up on that, that self-government that's being taught at home. All right, so let's learn our 4 basic skills. There's 4 basic skills and 5 teaching styles. What time does the next actual class start? Oh, 12:30? Okay, if I go over a minute, then I'm good. I don't have to stress. Okay, I was gonna like talk a million miles a minute, but I think I'm good. I'll try not to keep you though. I'll try not to keep you. I'll do my very best. All right, so, and you guys, this book talks about all of it, and there's audio of it, and I mean, there's a whole course I have like online that walks you through it. I mean, there's a ton of help that you can get for some of this, because as you can see, it's so much to give all in one day. So there's 4 basic skills. I have these 4 children's books that teach these 4 basic skills. So this one, London the Ray Says Okay, teaches the first skill, which is following instructions. There are 5 steps to following an instruction. You look at the person, and we already talked about why that's really important. Not only does it show you're ready to be taught something or to be instructed, but it shows you respect your parents. It also is a connection that you establish. So if you're in the habit of hollering things up the stairs or down the stairs or whatever, you might want to take a little bit more time and walk to the child. Look in their eyes and then give the instruction. This is your own self-government. If you don't actually look in their eyes and they don't get to go through all 5 steps, the instruction could perchance not be followed. And chances are really high they won't check back, which is step number 5. So the 5 steps are: you look at the person. Next is you keep a calm face, voice, and body. Teach your children, what does a calm face, voice, and body look like? What does it not look like? Boy, they love practicing that. That's fun. And then next is say okay, or ask to disagree appropriately. I know some people culturally say yes ma'am, no ma'am, that kind of thing. If you want to keep yes ma'am and yes sir and those kinds of things in your family, that's totally fine. We chose to say okay because I wanted my children to reiterate to themselves when they said something, like when I gave them an instruction and they said okay, I wanted it to be like, yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay with you giving me an instruction. I'm totally okay with this. Not only does it give you an affirming yes, I'll do it, but it also helps them recognize they're choosing to be okay. And that's why I like the term okay. Another part of that 3rd step is, so we got look at the person, keep a calm face, voice, and body, say okay, or ask to disagree appropriately. Disagree appropriately is the 4th basic skill that we teach. And this is their opportunity to share their opinion with you or their disagreement with you in a way that would be appropriate. We'll talk about how to do that. The 4th step is do the task immediately. Most people only focus on that step. They holler up the stairs, make your bed! And then later they walk by to see if it got done. And that's it. They just want number 4 done. But what about the condition of the child's heart? If the child doesn't look at you, keep a calm face, voice, and body, reiterate to you that they're okay making the bed, how do we know how they processed what happened during the bed? Is our parenting really about the bed? Is it really about the chore? Is it really about just getting stuff on a list done? Or is it about creating a certain kind of a person who's free? If it's about creating a certain kind of a person who's free, then it's got to be about all 5 things, not just doing the task immediately. Then the 5th one is check back. When a person returns and reports to their parent about what they did, then by checking back, then they get praised. They see, I did it. Not only do they acknowledge to themselves and to you, I did it, but they give you the opportunity as a parent to praise them. Remember how I said there are 5 teaching styles. The number 1 teaching style that's the most effective of any other way to teach your children is praise. Praise your children 6 to 10 times for every 1 time that you correct them. 6 to 10 times. You should be telling them the things that they're doing that are good. If some of you are thinking, I don't think my child does 6 to 10 good things in a day, then you might have to look pretty careful. Don't make stuff up, but you might have to say, oh, thank you for getting the cups out for dinner without being asked. Oh, thank you for buckling your seatbelt. I mean, I had to use that one. I had to say, wow, good job on buckling your seatbelt. I didn't even have to tell you. You know, to my foster children who literally were trying not to do anything good the whole day. They just knew we couldn't drive unless they buckled their seatbelt. Okay, so that's number 1. When they come report back to you, then that's going to happen. Jamie, do you want to come help me for a quick second? I didn't even tell her she was gonna come help me, but that's what she gets because I'm staying at her house. I'm just gonna use you and abuse you.
I am here.
Not only did you make me lunch, I'm gonna make you be my assistant. Okay, so you're gonna be my mom and you're gonna give me an instruction and I'm gonna do all 5 steps and then you get to correct me and tell me what I did right, okay?
Okay.
All right, so it can be fake, just tell me whatever. I need you to, whatever.
I need you to put that book over there.
Okay. Mom, I put that book over there. Is there anything else?
That's it, you're doing a great job.
Thanks. She did good, huh? It's really not that hard. Wait, stay. We're not done. We have 3 more skills. Yeah. Okay. I don't want you to go too far. The second skill is accepting a no answer. There's 4 steps to accepting a no answer. There's 3 of them are the same as following instruction. It's only the 4th one that is different. The steps are you look at the person, keep a calm face, voice, and body, say okay or ask to disagree appropriately, and then you drop the subject. If a person, and this book teaches it by the way, that's why I'm holding it, to drop the subject means you don't keep bringing it up. So I'm gonna not drop the subject so you can see. You just give me no answer, okay?
Okay.
Mom, can I go over to Susan's and play? That's not dropping the subject. Because am I still thinking about it? Am I still like, is it controlling me, bugging me? Yeah. Mom, can I go to Susan's to play? You never let me. Mom, she told me I could come over today. That's not dropping the subject. I'm not being okay about it, right? Or if I walked out of the room and hit my brother, or hit the wall, or whatever, or slammed my door. Those are all not dropping the subject, and you know what? You go correct it. You go correct it, even though they're not talking to you face to face about it anymore. Are you their advocate, or are you not? Are you gonna be merciful to them and help them not be taken over by bondage? Then you have to go correct it every time. Okay, so those are the steps to accepting a no answer.
So how do you correct that?
Hold on, I'm talking about in a minute. I'll get to that in just a second. I don't know who said that, but anyway, the third skill is accepting a consequence. All right, so I'm going to show you how to do a correction right now while we do that. So accepting a consequence, the steps are this. You look at the person, you keep a calm face, voice, and body. You say okay, or you ask to disagree appropriately. Then you do your consequence, whatever it happens to be, whatever chore or whatever your family does. And then you report back and drop the subject. So it's kind of like a combination of the first 2 together. Nothing new there, it's just a little bit different order. And it looks like this. Hold on. Where's that marker? Oh. So the 5 teaching styles, number 2 is pre-teaching. Pre-teaching or prepping. Number 3 is correcting. Number 4 is the rule of 3. Or intensive teaching. Number 5 is parent counseling, which we will not get to. Oh, I spelled that wrong. Parent counseling. Anyway, which we will not get to today. But those are the 5 different teaching styles. Pre-teaching looks like this. Jamie, I'm going to give you a no answer. Do you remember how to accept a no answer?
Maybe.
Yes. Okay, so what you do is you look at the person, you keep a calm face, voice, and body, then you say okay or ask to disagree appropriately, and then you drop the subject, okay? No, honey, you can't wear this shirt today. We're going to church, and that's not appropriate for church, okay?
Okay.
Good job. You looked right at me, you kept a calm face, voice, and body, you said okay, and then you dropped the subject, and I can tell you're fine with it. Thanks so much for respecting me. It's so mature. Okay, that's me pre-teaching her, giving her the no answer. She accepted it, so I praised her. It's a regular interaction that can happen all the time, right? At home. So boundaries are also no answers. Any line that you won't cross. Like you're breathing my air. That's like a boundary if you're too close to somebody, or you're using somebody else's socks. Those are all no answers. Everything no answer. Oh yeah, you look at the person. This is no answers. Look at the person. Is no answers? Is that what you want?
Oh, accepting a consequence.
Accepting a consequence. No, I just was showing how to pre-teach. We're going back and forth between. I realized. Yeah, pre-teaching. I tell her ahead of time. This is what I'm going to do. Are you ready to do this? And she might ask me, Mom, can I go play? And I could say, I'm going to give you a no answer. Do you remember how to accept a no answer? No, you can't go play. Isn't that funny that I would tell her ahead of time what I'm going to do right before I do it? It's funny, but our brains work really well with that, actually. So that kind of thing. Also teaching all of this to your children and all these skills to your children, practicing them ahead of time before you ever use them, that's all pre-teaching. This is a proactive form of parenting. They should know even how to correct you. They should be able to be the parent doing the rule of 3 to you before you ever use it. Not that they would do it to you, but they need to be able to role play it in that way and know everything ahead of time. Okay, the steps to accepting a consequence. I had to do pre-teaching because number 3 is correcting, and I can't do an accepting consequences without doing a correction. Okay, so you're gonna now be my child and you're gonna earn a negative consequence, okay? So that what you have to do is you have to look at the person, keep a calm face, voice, and body. Here, look, this little card, it will tell you right there. Okay, that's what you have to do. You have to keep a calm face, voice, and body. Say okay or ask to disagree appropriately, and then you need to go and do the consequence, and then check back and drop the subject, okay? Okay, so I'm going to do a correction. When I do a correction, there's another little card I have. We have some of these out there if you want some. Another little card that talks about how to do correcting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to describe what she did that was wrong. Then I'm going to describe what she should have done that would have been right. Then I'm going to tell her what she's earned for her negative consequence. And then I'm going to praise her for accepting it, and probably give her a rationale for why it's a good idea that she learns this skill. And then we would practice it again the right way. Because remember, correction, then teaching. I'm probably not going to bore you right now with role plays, but we'll just do one correction, okay? So, Jamie, just a minute ago, I walked down the hall and I saw your room, and it was really messy. And a little while ago, I gave you an instruction that you needed to go and clean your room. And you looked at me, you kept a calm face, voice, and body. You said okay, but then you didn't actually go do it or check back. And so you weren't following instructions. What you should have done was you should have gone immediately to do the task and then checked back. Since you chose not to, you've earned an extra chore, okay? Okay. So, good job on saying okay. I know you don't want to do an extra chore because you're really busy with some of your piano and stuff right now, but for your extra chore, you're going to get to vacuum the living room. So you'll go into your room, and then you'll vacuum the living room, and then be sure to check back with me about both of those things. Okay, let's practice following instructions just to make sure you remember all the steps. Then we would do a role play right now. We would practice 1 to 3 times doing it the right way. Sometimes she'd be the mom and I'd be the child, and she would give me an instruction and I would practice, and then we'd switch roles and we would practice with each other. I'm not going to do that with you right now due to time. But anyway,
was a roll your eyes. She's going to know how to do this.
Yeah, then you do the rule of 3, which we're going to talk about next. Okay. There's always so much. Okay, so anyway, okay, I need you to go and clean your room and then vacuum and then check back, okay? Okay. And she's totally fine. She's dropping the subject, so now go pretend to do those things. Boop-ba-da-doo, boop-ba-da-doo. Then she comes and checks back.
Do I check back after cleaning my room and then do the second chore?
Yes.
And then
Yes, that would be really good. Okay. Good job. Yes, okay.
I finished vacuuming and cleaning my room.
Fabulous, Jamie. You're so good at following instructions. I know it was probably just something you got distracted, but you just have to remember, get all the way to that check back so that you don't have to end up earning extra chores, and so that we don't think that maybe your heart's not in the right place to follow instructions, okay? Okay, good job. All right, the last skill of the 4 basic skills is disagreeing appropriately. Disagreeing appropriately should be their favorite skill, actually. It should be. It is the gateway skill to learning self-government. To disagree appropriately, you look at the person, you keep a calm face, voice, and body. Then you say that you understand the other person's point of view. Then you explain your point of view. You listen to what they have to say and say okay, and then drop the subject. This is what it looks like. It's super easy. The most important thing that people forget is they forget that you have to look at each other, and then they forget that you have to say you understand the other person's point of view. The principle is seek to understand, then to be understood. That's the principle of disagreeing appropriately. So it goes like this. I'm going to ask you a question, Mom, and you tell me no, okay? Then I will ask if I can disagree appropriately. You say yes, because always you want to say yes when they ask to disagree appropriately, unless they just asked you to disagree appropriately right then about the same thing and they're asking again, then you can say the answer is no. Then they're not accepting your no answer, okay? So then you say yes, then I'm gonna do my disagreement, and then you can choose whatever you want, okay? Mom, can I dye my hair blue?
No.
Okay, may I disagree appropriately?
Yes.
I understand that you don't want me to dye my hair blue because our family standard says that we won't have colored hair. But I'm in that play, for our homeschool group that's called Midsummer Night's Dream, and I get to be the blue fairy. And the director says that she wants us all to have colored hair so we really stand out as fairies. And so I thought maybe I could get the kind that just washes out after, like I could just put it in and then a couple of days later wash it out. I promise I wouldn't have blue hair for church on Sunday. Would that be okay?
That sounds actually good. Thank you for explaining all of that to me.
Yay! Thanks, Mom! Anyway, okay, so that's how you do disagreeing appropriately. She could still tell me no, and I would have to say okay. Part of disagreeing appropriately is being ready to accept that no answer as well. Yes?
Like, so once you said no, when they disagree appropriately, can they disagree appropriately again? Is that okay?
No.
It's not okay.
Not about the same thing. If it's about something else,
If
then
what if
yes.
they felt like they didn't explain themselves well? Or, like, you really don't, I mean, I'm just wondering,
Yeah,
this is my issue.
Yeah, like little attorneys. Yeah, no, you know what? You know what? There's a point when they're not respecting your role and they're manipulating you with it. They've got to be able to accept it. No. A lot of times say yes. If they go through that whole process, do you know how much self-government it takes to do that instead of whine? That's a lot. So if it's like, can I have another cookie, and and then they disagree appropriately about it, even if they just say, Mom, I understand you don't want me to have a cookie, but I really want one. Say, oh, I didn't know you wanted one so much. Okay, you can have another cookie. Like, I mean, honestly, a cookie, who cares? They're self-governing, that's so important. But there will get to be a point when they're abusing it and you need to up your nose a little bit more. But try not to be unreasonable. Sometimes they can use that to remind you that you're being a little bit like maybe micromanagey and stuff like that, and it's a good reminder that, wait, should I be controlling every pretzel that comes out of the bowl? No, maybe I shouldn't. I mean, like, there's things that we should like be careful about. Sometimes disagreeing appropriately can help us with that. All right, the last thing I want to talk about is the rule of three. I'm not going to get to parent counseling sessions. There's so many things, family standards, all this kind of stuff we could talk about. It's all in the book, and I have a course online that takes you all the way through it. So there's so many ways that you could get help learning more about how to put this all together in your home. Hopefully this gives you a launching point. But the rule of three is the final thing that I want to leave with you, and I really only have time just to like do it once, okay? And then you'll have to grab from there. But basically what I do is I do 3 things 3 times. I give a pre-teach. My pre-teach is fairly long, so listen for that. It's a longer thing I say. Then I give an instruction. Then I do a correction. And do you remember the 3 consequences that they can earn? Major maintenance, sodas, and then loss of privileges for 24 hours. And depending on age, right, on the hours, okay? So then I do those same 3 things 2 more times. So I do 3 things 3 times. That's why I call it the rule of 3. This is a moment of advocating for the freedom of the child. The child is in bondage. Their heart is moved far from you. You can't parent them in that condition, and they are not happy. Whether they're being silent or whether they are in your face angry, you continue to just say the rule of 3. They should know it before you ever started. And there's a trigger phrase I always say. The trigger phrase is, it seems to me that you might be out of instructional control. Can you be out of control, Jamie? You can be just obstinate if you want. You don't have to get angry, okay? Okay, so she's gonna be 15, and we're gonna pretend she's out of control. You gotta try, okay? Try to be out of control. And I'm gonna just go through and do the whole rule of 3 with her. Now, as I'm doing it, I'm looking into her eyes and I'm thinking, I love you, Jamie. I love you. And honestly, she can feel that. And I can trust that she can feel that. Her heart has to fight against the logic and the feeling of love that is coming from me in this moment when she is choosing bondage and to buy into a life for herself. And she's going to go all the way so I can show you the whole thing, okay?
What if I don't look at you when you're giving me all this?
It's fine. You could turn around.
All right.
Okay.
my
Then
kids
I
won't
still
look
would
at me.
look at you and think I love you, and you know what? Spiritually, you can feel this, okay? All right, so Jamie, it seems to me that you might be out of instructional control. I'm going to give you an instruction. If you choose not to follow the first instruction, then you will be choosing to earn a major maintenance. Then I will give you a second instruction. If you choose not to follow the second instruction, then you will be choosing to earn some sodas. Then I will give you a third instruction. If you choose not to follow the third instruction, then you will be choosing to lose your privileges for 24 hours. You have to remember that Sarah's birthday is tomorrow. That would mean you would miss that, as well as missing your swimming meet tonight and that kind of thing. Here is your first instruction. So that was all my pre-teach. I need you to close your eyes and take 3 deep breaths. You can pick any instruction, but I always use a calming one. Even though she doesn't seem fully out of control, her heart is in the, because she's really not, her heart is in the wrong place, okay? I need you to close your eyes and take 3 deep breaths, okay? Okay, just now, Jamie, I gave you an instruction, and you didn't look at me, you didn't keep a calm face, voice, and body, you didn't say okay or ask to disagree appropriately, you didn't do the task immediately or check back, so you didn't follow instructions. Since you chose not to follow the whole instruction, then you have chosen to earn a major maintenance.
But I don't want a major maintenance.
Now I'm going to start over again. Good job. Okay, now I'm going to start over again. And she says that, but I don't talk back.
Okay.
Okay, now I'm going to give you a second instruction. And if you choose not to follow the second instruction, then you will be choosing to earn some sodas. Then I will give you a third instruction. If you choose not to follow the third instruction, then you will be choosing to lose your privileges for 24 hours. Here is the second instruction. I need you to close your eyes and take 3 deep breaths, okay? Do all 5 steps of following instructions.
Not gonna do it.
Okay, just now I gave you an instruction and you didn't look at me, keep a calm face, voice, and body, say okay, do the task immediately, or check back. Since you chose not to, you learned to do some sodas when you're in instructional control. Now I'm going to give you a third instruction. If you choose not to follow the third instruction, then you will be choosing to lose your privileges for 24 hours. Here is the third instruction. I need you to close your eyes and take 3 deep breaths, okay? Okay, just now I gave you an instruction and you didn't do the steps to following instructions. What you should have done is you should have looked at the person, kept a calm face, voice, and body, said okay or asked to disagree appropriately, done the task immediately, and then checked back. Since you chose not to, you've earned to lose your privileges for 24 hours. Your 24 hours cannot begin until you are ready to follow an instruction. So I'm going to come back every 15 to 20 minutes and give you the opportunity to follow an instruction. As soon as you're ready to do all 5 steps of following an instruction, then your 24 hours may begin. Then I go and spend time with the other children who are doing good things. The person who is out of control should not take all the parents' time. It should take no more than like 10 minutes. Good equals good, that's cause and effect. Bad equals bad, okay? So that's super important. Of course, she's not really being bad, but bad behavior gets bad, like not a lot of attention. You don't get a lot of attention. So then I would come back to her and I would say, Jamie, are you ready to follow an instruction?
Nope, don't wanna do it.
Okay, what you need to do is you need to look at the person, keep a calm face, voice, and body, say okay, or ask to disagree appropriately, do the task immediately, and then check back. Here's your instruction. I need you to close your eyes and take 3 deep breaths, okay? Okay, I can see you're still not ready to follow an instruction. Just remember that your time won't actually be able to begin until you do. So I'll be back in another 15 minutes to give you another chance. So right now, she has no control over me. Everything's in her court. She knows it. Like, in her court for her, meaning there's nothing she can manipulate. She can sit there and she can choose for days to miss her lessons, to miss youth night at the church, to miss everything. But her 24 hours cannot begin until she does all 5 steps of following an instruction. At any point during the rule of 3 or afterward when she does those 5 steps, then I praise her, and then we talk about what she's earned, and you don't have to say, okay, now you do your major maintenance, then your sodas, then your 24. You just start the 24 and then you let them do their major maintenance and sodas, and then they come to you after everything they've done throughout that 24-hour period, and they just do chore after chore after chore. That's what they do. And that's part of accepting their consequence. If they don't come to you and report back, if they miss any of those 5 steps, they're not accepting their consequence, and you got to do a correction. If they go out of control again during that time, during that 24-hour period of time, then they actually you can actually start the rule of 3 again. If you get all the way through it, the 24 hours could begin again. But chances are they won't do that. So you have to explain all of those things to them. Anyway, whew, that was a lot. I did go over. I thought I might. I'm sorry. It's lunchtime. We cut into your lunch. I just want to leave you with one final closing thought, and that is that the founders of our country knew that a free people were a self-governing people. Your children are more under attack, more in danger of oppression than we were then. The battle is not with another country. The battle is with ourselves. We have IPSIs, we have attacks that are coming from every angle. From the media and culture, from the neighbor next door, and from ideas gone awry. Our population is morally corrupt. In order to awaken the morals, we must teach our children the skills that they need to make themselves free. As you teach your children self-government, you could not only free them and their future children, but it could ripple out and change our whole world. And that's why I do this. God bless everybody. We'll see you more a little bit later on.